Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time. Not to a grand palace ball or a sun-drenched Florentine piazza, but to a place far more intimate and intense. We're heading to the cold, stone-walled chamber of a dying Renaissance military commander. This isn't the story of a famous artist or a philosopher, it's the story of a man whose power was built on steel, strategy, and secrets. A man whose passing will uncover a life far darker and more complex than anyone ever imagined. You're going to be right there in the room as a powerful era comes to a quiet, uncertain end. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, let me know what city you're in and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the chill of the stone floor through the soles of your shoes. A damp cold that seems to radiate from the very bones of the castle. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of beeswax, wood smoke, and something else. Something medicinal and vaguely unsettling. A mix of dried herbs and anxious sweat. You are standing in the shadows of a great bedchamber. Its walls draped in heavy tapestries that do little to soften the fortress-like austerity of the room. They depict epic hunts and heroic battles, scenes of vibrant life that feel like a cruel joke in the face of the scene before you. In the center of the room, engulfed by a mountain of furs and embroidered blankets, lies the man himself, the Condottieri, the commander, even now, with his breath coming in shallow, ragged waves. His presence is immense, his face, etched with the lines of 100 campaigns and 1,000 ruthless decisions, is pale against the dark pillows. This is not the gentle decline of a well-fed merchant. This is the slow, stubborn surrender of a wolf. You glance around the room. A handful of people share this vigil with you. His eldest son, his face a mask of strained composure, stands nearest the bed, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword as if for reassurance. A priest murmurs prayers in a low, continuous drone, his Latin barely audible over the crackle of the fire. And in the corner, a physician, looking utterly defeated, occasionally dabs the commander's brow with a cloth. This is the end of an era, and you can feel the weight of it in the silence between heartbeats. This man, like so many of his kind, was a product of a fractured and glorious Italy. The Condottieri are either mercenary captains or the true power brokers of the age. They were brilliant, ambitious, and utterly pragmatic, selling their swords and the loyalty of their private armies to whichever city-state or noble house offered the most gold. This is a well-established part of Renaissance history. These commanders were the CEOs of war, managing logistics, pioneering new tactics, and becoming fabulously wealthy and powerful in the process. But they were also feared, and for good reason. Their loyalty was always, ultimately, to themselves. Historians still argue about the true nature of these men. Were they simply opportunistic warlords, holding entire regions hostage with the threat of violence, or were they a necessary evil, the only source of stability in a landscape of constant political scheming? Some even see them as patrons of the arts and pioneers of modern statecraft. As you stand in this room, you realize the answer is likely all of the above, and then some. The whispers you've heard over the years in the castle courtyard and kitchens paint an even more complicated picture. Stories of rivals who fell mysteriously ill before a crucial battle. Of enemies who, after a private dinner with the commander, seemed to lose their nerve entirely. Rumors that he dealt not just in strategy, but in secrets of a much darker nature. A small, almost forgotten detail catches your eye. One of the high windows has been cracked open just slightly, letting in a sliver of cold night air. It's an old superstition, a bit of folk belief that persists even in the halls of the powerful, opening a window at the moment of death to allow the soul a clear path to depart. It's a strangely tender, human gesture in a room dominated by a man known for his inhuman resolve. A quiet acknowledgement that for all his power, wealth, and fearsome reputation, he is subject to the same final journey as the lowliest stable hand. It's one of those little rituals that history books rarely mention, but which filled the everyday lives of people in this era. The priest's voice falters. The physician steps back from the bed, his shoulders slumping. The son lets out a breath he seems to have been holding for hours. A profound, hollow silence descends upon the room, deeper and more absolute than before. The fire continues to crackle. The tapestry continues to depict its silent, heroic life. But the great man, the force of nature that held this entire castle, this domain, in his grip, is gone. The wolf has breathed his last. The air shifts. The palpable tension of waiting for death is replaced by a new, uncertain energy. The era of the commander is over. A new one, filled with questions and the heavy task of succession, has just begun. And as you stand there, a silent observer to the end of a life, you have no idea that the most shocking part of this man's story is not how he lived, but what he chose to leave behind, hidden away from the world. The days that follow are a blur of muted activity, a strange and hollow routine that settles over the castle like a fine layer of dust. The commander's body has been laid to rest with all the requisite ceremony, but the ghost that lingers is not his soul, it's the vacuum of his power. And the first, most critical task in filling that vacuum is to understand its exact dimensions. An inventory must be taken. So now, you find yourself part of a small, solemn procession moving from room to room. Your ear accompanied by the commander's son, whose grief has been sharpened into a keen, almost predatory focus, and a pair of clerks with ink-stained fingers. They carry a heavy leather-bound ledger. Its pages still pristine, and their quills scratch nervously in the quiet halls. This is not mere curiosity, this is a legal and political necessity. The inventory is a formal declaration of assets, a document that will serve as the bedrock of the son's inheritance, a shield against tribal claimants and creditors. It is the process of translating a man's life into a list of objects. You start in the armory. The air here smells of cold iron and oil. Racks of pikes stand like a silent, waiting forest. Polished cuirasses and helmets hang on wooden stands, gleaming dully in the light from the high, narrow windows. You run a hand over a breastplate, its surface a flawless mirror of dark steel. A small, elegant dent near the shoulder, the only evidence it was ever used. The clerk scratches away item 1, suit of Milanese field armor, fluted and engraved with the family crest. Item 3, dozen crossbows. You would. Item 20, barrels of fine black powder. It's the professional paraphernalia of a warrior. Impressive and predictable. From there, you move through the great hall, the dining chambers, the reception rooms. The sheer stuff is overwhelming. Heavy oak tables that could seat 50. Tapestries from Flanders so vast and detailed you could get lost in their woven worlds. Venetian glass so fine it seems to be made of trapped air. Silver platters, gilded ewers, and chests carved with such intricate detail they seem more sculpture than furniture. The clerk's list grows longer and longer, a testament to a life of successful, ruthless acquisition. This is a classic display of Renaissance wealth, what we now call conspicuous consumption. But historians still debate the true motive behind such extravagance in this period. Was it simply a way to broadcast power? To intimidate rivals and impress allies with an undeniable show of financial might, or was there a deeper, more personal meaning to it? Some scholars argue that surrounding oneself with beautiful, well-crafted objects was seen as a reflection of an orderly, unnoble mind, a kind of external projection of inner virtue. For a man like the commander, whose profession was the chaos of war, perhaps this rigid, opulent order was a necessary psychological counterbalance. You look at a massive, ornate four-poster bed, its curtains heavy with gold thread, and you wonder if it brought him peace, or if it was just another piece on a very large, very real chessboard. You continue into the more private wings of the castle. The commander's personal library is, at first glance, exactly what you'd expect. He was a military man, not a scholar. The shelves hold tactical manuals by Vegetius, histories by Livy and Plutarch, and treatises on fortifications. There are maps, hand-drawn and colored, of Tuscany, Lombardy, and the Papal States. Their surfaces marked with the faint lines of planned campaigns. It's the library of a man who saw knowledge as a tool, a weapon to be deployed. And yet, there's a strange, almost impersonal quality to it all. It's like walking through a museum exhibit titled The Life of a Condottieri. It's all correct, all in its place, but it feels like a performance. It's the life he showed the world. You can't shake the feeling that something essential is missing. This feeling brings to mind a fascinating, and somewhat quirky, aspect of the Italian Renaissance nobility, the studio law. This was a small, private study, a secret room often hidden behind a bookcase or an unassuming door. It wasn't for work, but for contemplation. A place where a prince or a merchant could retreat from the world and surround himself with objects that reflected his innermost passions, be it ancient coins, rare gems, philosophical texts, or anatomical drawings. It was a mind palace made real, a space of true self-expression, hidden away from the judgment of the public eye. Most castles or plazas of this stature would have one, but as you cross off the last of the mapped-out rooms from your list, you realize you haven't seen one. The clerks seem ready to close their ledger. The son is pacing, his boots echoing on the stone, an anxious energy about him. It seems the inventory is complete. A life of power, reduced to a neat column of assets. It feels anticlimactic. Hanu. Just as the head clerk is about to sprinkle drawings and over the final page of ink, a servant, an old man who has been with the family for decades, silent until now, clears his throat. All eyes turn to him. He looks nervous, his gaze flickering towards the commander's son, then to the floor. "Forgive me, my lord," he says, his voice raspy, "but we have not checked the master's old falconry tower." The son freezes. The clerks look confused, one of them whispering, "That tower has been unused for 20 years. The stairs are unsound." The old servant swallows hard and continues, "He still went there. Sometimes, late at night. He kept the door locked himself." He points down a dark, dusty corridor you had all ignored, a passage leading to the oldest, most neglected part of the castle. At its end, almost hidden in the gloom, is a small, iron-banded oak door, a door that wasn't on any of the castle's official plans, a door with no visible keyhole. The air in the narrow corridor is stale and cold, disturbed for the first time in what feels like years. The light from the single torch you carry throws long, dancing shadows that make the passage seem to writhe and twist. Dust motes, ancient and thick, swirl in the golden light like tiny, frantic ghosts. The silence here is different from the rest of the castle. It's a deep, settled silence, the kind that comes from being forgotten. The commander's son leads the way, his usual confident stride replaced by a cautious, almost hesitant gait. The two clerks follow, their ledger now seeming flimsy and irrelevant. Their faces a mixture of professional duty and plain human apprehension. You arrive at the door. It's exactly as the old servant described, thick oak planks bound with heavy, rusted iron straps. It's set deep into the stone wall of the old falconry tower, a part of the castle that predates the commander himself. A relic from a simpler, cruder time, but the most unsettling feature is the lock. It's not the large, straightforward iron lock you see on the other doors in the fortress. This one is smaller, more intricate, made of a darker metal that seems to drink the torchlight, and as the old servant had noted, there is no keyhole, just a smooth, flat plate of steel where a keyhole should be. The son runs his gloved fingers over the cold metal. He presses, he pushes, he tries to find a seam or a hidden latch. Nothing. The door is a solid, impassive puzzle. He turns to the old servant, his voice sharp with frustration. How did he open it? The old man wrings his hands, his eyes wide. I do not know, my lord. I only ever saw him go in. He would place his hand upon the lock, and it would open. I swear it. I saw it through a crack in the storeroom wall. The clerks exchange a look of profound skepticism, whispering about old men's fancies and the tricks of firelight. But the son is not so quick to dismiss it. He knew his father. He knew the man's love for intricate things, for mechanisms and secrets. The Italian Renaissance was, after all, an age of incredible engineering. This was the era of Brunelleschi's dome, of Leonardo's fantastical war machines. The idea of a keyless, mechanical lock was not outside the realm of possibility. It was, however, deeply strange. This leads us to a fascinating and often overlooked aspect of this period, the obsession with automata and complex mechanics. While we think of Leonardo da Vinci as a singular genius, he was part of a broader culture fascinated by machines that could mimic life or create illusions. Princes and wealthy patrons commissioned elaborate clocks with moving figures, mechanical lions that could walk and draw, and trick fountains that would surprise their guests. It was a form of entertainment, a display of wealth, but also a profound philosophical statement about man's ability to understand and replicate the mechanics of God's creation. A keyless lock would have been the ultimate status symbol for a man like the commander, a private piece of magic that only he could command. The forge, the son says, his voice decisive. "Get me a hammer and a pry bar." There's a moment of hesitation, desecrating a locked room of the deceased felt improper, but the son's authority is absolute, and the mystery is too compelling to ignore. Two servants are dispatched, their footsteps echoing as they hurry away. While you wait, you can't help but stare at the door, your mind racing. What requires this level of secrecy? Gold State secrets say. Hidden mistress. None of it seems to fit the commander's character. He was a man who flaunted his wealth and whose secrets were usually hidden in plain sight, veiled by power, not locked behind puzzle doors. The tools arrive. The son, refusing to let a common blacksmith be the first to breach his father's sanctum, takes the heavy sledgehammer himself. He swings, and the sound is deafening in the narrow corridor. A brutal clang of metal on metal as the hammer strikes the iron bands. The door groans but holds. He swings again, and again, his grunts of effort mixing with the percussive shocks. Sweat beads on his forehead. This is no longer a matter of inventory, it has become a battle of wills, a son physically wrestling with the last bastion of his father's secrecy. Finally, with a splintering crack that sounds like a breaking bone, the wood around the lock begins to give way. He throws the hammer down and takes the crowbar, wedging it into the splintered gap. He puts his full weight on it, his muscles straining. The ancient wood shrieks in protest, more splintering. A loud groan, and then a sudden, sharp snap. The lock breaks. The door swings inward with a low, mournful creak, revealing not a room, but a wall of absolute, impenetrable blackness. A pot of air, cold and smelling of something you can't quite place, something like dry earth, bitter herbs, and old paper washes over you. It's a smell that feels wrong, ancient and unhealthy. The son takes the torch from your hand and holds it high, stepping cautiously over the threshold. The clerks, their fear now warring with their insatiable curiosity, huddle together just behind him. You follow, your heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against your ribs. The torchlight cuts a weak, trembling circle into the oppressive darkness, and for a moment, you can't make out anything at all. The room seems to swallow the light. Then, as your eyes adjust, the shapes begin to resolve, and you realize, with a sudden, sinking feeling of dread, why this room was locked so securely. There are no chests of gold, no stacks of incriminating letters, no works of art. The room is a laboratory, a workshop, an alchemist's study, and as the torchlight sweeps across shelves filled with strangely shaped glass vials, clay pots sealed with wax, and stacks of leather-bound books that seem to hum with a forbidden energy, you understand. The most valuable, and most dangerous, part of the commander's legacy was never meant to be found. The torch flame flickers, casting a nervous, dancing light across the scene, and for a long moment, the only sound is the collective, sharp intake of breath, The air inside is thick and still, layered with the dust of years and a complex, unsettling aroma. It's a perfumer's nightmare, the sharp, metallic tang of minerals, the bitter scent of dried botanicals, the musty sweetness of decay, all underpinned by the smell of old parchment and beeswax. It's the scent of secrets. You step further into the room, your boots crunching on a fine layer of gritty dust that covers the floor. The space is circular, conforming to the shape of the old tower. It's small, perhaps no more than 15 feet across, and every available inch of the curved wall is covered with shelves, from floor to ceiling. This isn't a storage room, it's a collection. A library of things that are not books. The sun holds the torch higher, his face a pale, unreadable mask in the flickering light. He walks slowly towards the nearest set of shelves, and you follow his gaze. You are not looking at treasures. You are looking at a meticulously organized arsenal of the bizarre, rows upon rows of glass vessels. Some squat and round like tiny pumpkins, others tall and slender like frozen serpents. They are filled with powders of every conceivable color: the brilliant, toxic yellow of orpiment, the rich, deadly green of Valdirix, the deep, royal purple of some unknown crystalline substance. In other jars, murky liquids sit in silent suspension, some with desiccated things floating within them: a spider, a curled leaf, a small, pale root that looks disturbingly like a human hand. The clerks, who had so diligently catalogued silver plates and silk banners, are utterly useless here. One of them makes a half-hearted attempt to start a new page in the ledger, his quill hovering over the parchment. "Item," he begins, then trails off, his eyes wide. How do you catalogue this? One jar of ominous purple powder, several vials of questionable liquid. The language of accounting fails completely in the face of such strangeness. This moment perfectly illustrates a major theme of the Renaissance: the thin, blurry line between science and magic. To our modern eyes, this looks like a sorcerer's workshop, but to a man of the 15th or 16th century, this was a place of scientia, of knowledge. The disciplines were not yet cleanly separated. A man who studied the stars was an astronomer, but also an astrologer. A man who mixed chemicals to create new pigments or medicines was a chemist, but also an alchemist. Historians often debate where one ended and the other began. The truth is, for the people living it, they were often two sides of the same coin: a passionate, and sometimes dangerous, quest to understand the hidden mechanics of the universe. This room is a perfect, tangible example of that intellectual fusion. You notice a small, sturdy workbench against the far wall. It's littered with the tools of a strange and precise trade. There are bronze mortars and pistols, their bowls stained with a rainbow of residual powders. There are tiny, delicate scales, the kind an apothecary might use for measuring ingredients with exacting precision. A small charcoal brazier sits cold and dark, a piece of warped, bubbled glass lying beside it, the relic of a failed experiment, and in the center of the bench lies a book, open in spine up. Beside it, something else catches the light. A box. It's not large, no bigger than a shoebox, but it's crafted from a dark, polished wooden inlaid with intricate patterns of ivory and mother of pearl. Unlike the brute force of the armory or the ostentatious wealth of the great hall, this object speaks of a different kind of power: subtle, patient, and personal. It's beautiful, but its beauty is cold and unnerving. It feels like the centerpiece of this entire collection, the heart of the secret, Pandora's box, sitting quietly on a dusty workbench. The commander's son seems to think so, too. He bypasses the shelves of mysterious ingredients and walks directly to the workbench. He reaches out, not for the book, but for the box. His fingers hesitate for a fraction of a second before touching it. A rare sign of uncertainty, he lifts it. It's heavy for its size. He examines it, turning it over in his hands. There is no visible lock, much like the door to the tower. Instead, on the top, there is a small, silver plate engraved with the symbol of a serpent eating its own tail. The Ouroboros. "What is this madness?" he whispers, his voice low and tight. AGS speaking to himself, but the question hangs in the dead air for everyone. He was his father's son. Zao. He thought he knew the man. He knew the soldier, the strategist, the ruthless politician. He did not know this man, the man who collected poisons, the man who practiced what alchemy witchcraft. It's about a little tidbit of Renaissance life that powerful men, especially those in the violent and uncertain world of Italian politics, often dabbled in the occult. It wasn't just about a lust for power or a desire to harm enemies. It was also about gaining an edge. An edge. If astrology could predict a lucky day for a battle, why not use it if an alchemical elixir promised to sharpen the mind or instill fear in an opponent? Why not try it? It was an age of high stakes and deep paranoia. This room, you're beginning to realize, might have been the commander's ultimate insurance policy. The son places the box back on the workbench with a soft, definitive click. He turns his gaze back to the shelves, to the rows of silent, colorful threads. His expression is no longer one of mere shock. It's hardening into something else, something colder. The shock of discovery is passing, and, in its place, a slow, dawning horror is beginning to bloom. The silence that follows stretches, taut and heavy. It's no longer the silence of awe, but the silence of creeping dread. The initial shock, that jolt of stepping into a forbidden world, is now seeping away, leaving behind a cold, clammy residue of fear. The two clerks, who had previously been buzzing with a kind of morbid curiosity, are now pressed back against the doorway, as if the very air in the room might be toxic. They are men of numbers and records, of tangible assets and clear lineages. Miss, this is an abyss in their ledger, a liability that cannot be quantified. The commander's son stands motionless in the center of the room, a statue carved from disbelief. He slowly turns his head, his gaze sweeping over the shelves again. But this time his eyes aren't just seeing. They're recontextualizing. Every jar, every crystal, every dried root is no longer just a strange object. It is a potential crime, a potential sin. In an age where a whisper of heresy could bring the Inquisition to your door, this room is more dangerous than an entire armory. It's a testament to a secret life so profound and so risky that it bordered on madness. You watch his face, illuminated by the unsteady torchlight, the strong jaw, the confident eyes. They are his father's. But now, they are clouded with a terrible, dawning comprehension. This wasn't a hobby. This was an obsession. An entire hidden infrastructure dedicated to what he thought he was inheriting: land, an army, a title. He is now faced with the possibility that he has inherited a curse. The rumors you'd heard for years in the castle, the whispers about his father's enemies suffering sudden, wasting illnesses, or rivals losing their minds at crucial moments, they were always just that: whispers, battlefield gossip, the jealous mutterings of the defeated. Now, standing in this room, those whispers have coalesced into a terrifying, unavoidable shout. He finally moves, his actions stiff and deliberate. He walks back to the doorway and plucks the torch from the trembling hand of a servant, jamming it into a rusted iron sconce on the wall. The room is now bathed in a more stable, if still gloomy, light. He turns to the clerks, his voice devoid of all emotion. You two, don't say nothing of this to anyone. Your master was a collector of rare apothecary ingredients, nothing more. Do you understand? His tone leaves no room for argument. The clerks nod, their faces pale, and practically stumble over each other in their haste to retreat back down the dark corridor. They are relieved to be dismissed, to be excised from this discovery. The son then turns to you and the old servant who revealed the door's existence. His eyes linger on the old man for a moment, a complex flicker of anger and gratitude, before he speaks again, his voice softer now, laced with exhaustion. You to stay. I need witnesses. Witnesses to what? He doesn't say. With the clerks gone, the atmosphere shifts again. It becomes more intimate, more conspiratorial. You are no longer part of an official inventory. You are now part of a secret council of 3, bound by the shared knowledge of what lies within this tower. The sun seems to shrink a little. The facade of the cold, decisive air cracking to reveal the confused and overwhelmed man beneath. He runs a hand through his hair, a gesture of profound weariness. "My sword," he begins, but the sentence hangs unfinished in the air, heavy with all the things he cannot bring himself to say. One of the most persistent, and perhaps unfair, stereotypes of the Italian Renaissance is that of the casual poisoner. Thanks to figures like the Borgias, the era has become synonymous with deaths by poisoned glove or tainted wine. While the fear of poison was very real, and some high-profile cases certainly occurred, historians argue about how widespread the practice actually was. Some suggest the fear far outweighed the reality, and that many poisonings were likely misdiagnosed diseases like dysentery or cancer. The true art of the poisoner was perhaps not in the act itself, but in the terror it inspired. The mere reputation for knowing such secrets was a weapon in itself. Was this room a genuine laboratory for murder? Or was it the ultimate prop in a long campaign of psychological warfare? The sun, faced with the physical evidence, is clearly leaning towards the former. You notice something on the floor that you missed before, half hidden under the workbench. It's a small, earthenware pot. Its lid cracked. A faint, sweetish odor emanates from it. You nudge it with the toe of your boot. A cluster of dark, shriveled berries rolls out. They look like dried cherries, but you instinctively know they are not. This is a strange little detail that many historical accounts leave out the sheer banality of some of these ingredients. While things like arsenic and nightshade were well-known poisons, Renaissance practitioners also used a vast array of common plants, minerals, and even animal parts, believing they held specific toxic properties. The knowledge was a mix of genuine pharmacology, folklore, and pure superstition. These berries could be harmless, or they could be a potent, fast-acting neurotoxin. There was no way to know for sure. The sun finally breaks the silence, his voice a low growl. "We burn it," he says, his gaze fixed on the shelves. "We burn it all. Tonight, we take everything out into the courtyard, and we reduce it to ash. We will say it was a fire caused by old, faulty timbers. No one will ever know. It's a desperate, drastic solution born of fear and shame. He wants to erase this part of his father, to sanitize his legacy, to protect himself and his family from the stain of this dark secret." But as he speaks, his eyes drift back to the workbench, to the beautiful, malevolent box and the open book beside it. Even as he orders its destruction, a flicker of something else crosses his face, a sliver of his father's curiosity. The dangerous, magnetic pull of forbidden knowledge. The silence of the room seems to mock his decision, whispering that some secrets, once discovered, are not so easily unlearned. The sun's declaration to burn everything hangs in the air, a decisive, brutal command. But even as the words leave his lips, you can see the conflict in his eyes. He is a man caught between two powerful, opposing instincts: the desire to protect his family's name and the inherited, insatiable curiosity that seems to be coded into his very DNA. The fire is the safe, clean solution, but the secrets are a siren's call. He seems to argue with himself in silence for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the workbench. Then, with a sigh of resignation, he walks over to it. He doesn't reach for the ornate box, not yet. Instead, his attention is on the mundane, the jars and vials that line the shelves. Your earlier fear now tempered by a morbid fascination. You are standing in a library of lethality, a physical encyclopedia of things that can kill. He picks up a small, stoppered glass flask containing a vibrant, emerald green liquid. He holds it up to the torchlight, and the liquid glows with an unnatural luminosity. "Verdierix," he murmurs, his voice low. He recognizes it. Verdierix, or copper acetate, was a common artist's pigment, used to create the brilliant greens in illuminated manuscripts and paintings. but it was also a well-known corrosive poison. This is a perfect example of the dual-use nature of so many substances in this era. The same material that could create divine beauty on a canvas could, in different hands, be used to cause an agonizing death. The line between creation and destruction was incredibly thin. He sets the flask down gently, his touch surprisingly careful for a man who just ordered the whole collection destroyed. He moves along the shelf, his fingers hovering over the labels. Some are written in neat, clear Latin. Accortophonie reads one, a name that sends a chill down your spine. It was a legendary, slow-acting poison from the period, said to be colorless, tasteless, and odorless, a concoction of arsenic and lead. Its invention is often attributed to a woman named Julia Toffanet in the 17th century. But historians debate whether the name was a catch-all term for similar arsenic-based poisons that existed long before. Seeing the name written here, in a private collection from an earlier time, suggests the legend had deeper, older roots. Was this the real thing? Or was it the commander's own attempt to replicate the infamous formula? He moves on. Another jar, this one ceramic and sealed with dark red wax, is labeled Cantarella, another name from the dark folklore of the Italian Renaissance, famously associated with the Borgia family. It was supposedly their poison of choice, though its exact composition remains a subject of intense historical speculation. Most scholars believe it was another arsenic compound, perhaps mixed with other ingredients to mask its effects or increase its potency. The fact that the commander had a substance he called Cantarella is almost more important than what was actually in the jar. It shows an intent, a conscious effort to align himself with the most feared and powerful traditions of clandestine power. You notice something peculiar as you examine the shelves more closely. It's the organization. It's not random. The substances seem to be grouped. On one shelf, you have the fast-acting minerals and metallic salts arsenic, antimony, mercury. On another, a collection of botanicals, the glossy blackberries of nightshade belladonna, the delicate purple flowers of monkshood wolfsbane, the mottled seeds of the castor bean, and on a third, even stranger things, dried toads, powdered snake venom, and what looks suspiciously like a human skull, ground into a coarse powder. This raises a fascinating and slightly gruesome question: where did he get all the some items, like verdurigs, could be made or bought from an artist's supplier? Others, like belladonna, grew wild. But arsenic exotic venoms, these weren't things you could purchase at the local market. This collection implies a network, a clandestine supply chain of dealers and collectors who traded in the forbidden. It speaks to a hidden, underground economy running parallel to the legitimate trade of the Renaissance. And then you see it, tucked away on a lower shelf, almost as if in shame. A small bottle filled with a clear, oily liquid. The label is simple: Aluum ricini, castor oil. A common, powerful laxative. You almost laugh. Amidst all these legendary and terrifying poisons, here is the most mundane of stomach remedies. It's a bizarrely humanizing detail. It suggests that perhaps not everything in this room was for murder. Perhaps some of it was for medicine. Or maybe, and this is a more cynical thought, the commander understood that sometimes the best way to incapacitate a rival general before a battle wasn't with a deadly toxin, but with a well-timed, socially debilitating illness. A bit of historical dark humor. The son seems to have seen enough of the ingredients. The sheer scope of the collection has clearly shaken him. The vibrant colors in the bottles, the brilliant yellows, the vivid greens, the deep reds start to look less like a rainbow and more like a warning. Each color is a different kind of death, a different kind of suffering, a slow burn in the stomach, a frantic hammering of the heart, a creeping paralysis of the lungs. The abstract concept of poison is now terrifyingly concrete, laid out before you in a silent, colorful spectrum of malice. The decision to burn it all now seems less like an act of shame and more like a necessary act of purification. Having surveyed the chilling library of lethal ingredients, the son's attention finally returns to the epicenter of the room, the workbench. The decision to destroy everything still hangs in the air. But an unspoken addendum has formed. Before the sire, he must understand. He needs to look into the mind of the man who assembled this collection. And the key, he censors, is not in the ornate box, but in the book lying open beside it. He approaches the bench with the deliberate steps of someone entering a confessional. The book is not large, but is thick, bound in dark, unmarked leather that has been worn smooth with use. The pages are vellum, not paper, and they are filled with dense, crumbed handwriting. The torchlight casts a warm, yellow glow on the page, and you lean in closer, peering over his shoulder. Your breath catches in your throat. It's not written in Italian, or Latin, or any language you can recognize. The page is a dizzying tapestry of symbols, numbers, and strange, angular characters. It's a cipher, a complex, personal code known only to the commander himself. Here. A recognizable symbol breaks the pattern, an astrological sign for Mars, the alchemical symbol for gold, a crude, hand-drawn sketch of a plant that looks like hemlock. But these are just islands of meaning in a sea of utter incomprehensibility. The entire book, every single page, is locked away behind a wall of cryptographic security. The sun lets out a low, frustrated growl. It's another lock, another puzzle, another layer to his father's obsessive secrecy. This discovery is somehow more infuriating than the keyless door. This isn't just a barrier to entry, it's a barrier to understanding. The answers are all here, inches from his fingertips. But they might as well be on the moon. Cryptography was a booming field during the Renaissance, as the city-states of Italy engaged in constant political intrigue and warfare. The need for secure communication became paramount. Ambassadors, spies, and generals all relied on increasingly complex ciphers to protect their messages from enemy eyes. The famous polyalphabetic cipher, often is attributed to Blaise de Vigenère in the 16th century, actually has its roots in the work of Leon Battista Alberti a century earlier. Alberti, a true Renaissance man, created a cipher disk that was revolutionary for its time. It's highly likely that a military commander, a man whose life depended on strategy and secret intelligence, would be not only familiar with these techniques but also proficient in creating his own. This notebook is a testament to that proficiency. The sun flips a few pages, his frustration mounting. The script is maddeningly consistent. There are diagrams of chemical apparatuses next to astrological charts. There are lists of names next to long strings of numbers. There are recipes. You assume that detail measurements and procedures, all hidden behind the veil of the cipher. He is holding his father's life's work, his darkest thoughts and most dangerous knowledge, and it's all just gibberish. Historians are still debating the true purpose of many such encrypted manuscripts from this period. The most famous example is, of course, the Voynich manuscript, a book filled with a completely unknown script and bizarre illustrations that has defied every attempt at decryption for centuries. Was it a genuine, unbreakable code hiding profound secrets? Was it an elaborate hoax designed to swindle a wealthy patron? Or was it something else entirely, perhaps the product of a gloss over LIC, or someone speaking in tongues, writing down divine revelations in a personal, angelic alphabet? The commander's notebook falls into this ambiguous category. Its purpose is as locked away as its contents. As you stare at the cryptic text, your eyes catch a small, marginal note on one of the pages. Unlike the rest of the script, this is written in plain, clear Italian, in the commander's familiar, sharp handwriting. It's a single sentence, scribbled next to a complex diagram of what looks like a distillation process. It reads fallimento, la temperatura troppo alta. Failure. The sun translates, his voice barely a whisper. The temperature was too high. Patience is the principal virtue. It's a tiny crack in the armor, a single, human moment of frustration and self-correction bleeding through the impenetrable code. He failed. He messed up. The great, infallible commander. The man who never seemed to make a mistake on the battlefield, made mistakes in here. This note transforms the book from a cold, intimidating enigma into something profoundly personal. It's a diary, a lab journal of a man trying, and often failing, to master a set of dangerous and forbidden arts. It hints that the path to this knowledge was not one of easy mastery, but of painstaking, frustrating trial and error. This tiny glimpse of vulnerability seems to change something in the son. The anger in his face softens, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. He is not just looking at the secrets of a poisoner or a sorcerer. He is looking at the private struggles of his father. He gently closes the book, the soft thud of the leather cover echoing in the small room. The decision to burn it is no longer so simple. Burning the ingredients was one thing that was just destroying dangerous materials. But burning this book, that would be like burning the man himself. The secret, hidden man that no one, not even his own son, ever truly knew. He looks at the notebook, then at the ornate box, then back at the notebook. A choice has to be made. Erase the memory, or attempt to understand the man. The fire seems like a betrayal now, an act of intellectual cowardice. But the alternative is to step into this world himself, to take on the burden of this dangerous knowledge. He is standing at a crossroads, with his father's ghost pointing him down a very dark path. The son's internal conflict is palpable in the dusty silence of the tower. The encrypted notebook, now closed, sits on the workbench like a silent challenge. To burn it would be to burn the last, most intimate part of his father. To keep it would be to invite a dangerous shadow into his own life. He turns away from the bench, as if to physically distance himself from the decision, and his gaze drifts around the small, circular room. It snags on something you hadn't paid much attention to before: the single, high window. It's a narrow, unglazed slit in the thick stone wall, designed more for ventilation than for light. Through it, you can see a sliver of the night sky, a deep indigo pricked with a few early stars. But what draws the sun's attention is what's growing just outside. Its leaves brushing against the stone sill. A thick, woody vine. Its leaves are dark, glossy green, has climbed the entire height of the old tower, and hanging from the vine are small clusters of pale, almost white, flowers. He walks to the window and peers out, his expression shifting from conflict to a new, dawning realization. He seems to recognize the plant. He turns to the old servant, who has remained a silent, stoic presence this whole time. The small garden, the son says, his voice flat. The one at the base of this tower. My mother always said it was my father's private herb garden. She said he grew things for his humors, for his headaches. The old servant nods slowly. Die, my lord. He tended it himself. No one else was permitted inside. He called it his garden of simples. A garden of simples was a common term for a medicinal herb garden, where one grew basic remedies. But as the son looks from the vine at the window back to the shelves laden with deadly botanicals, the innocent name takes on a sinister, bitterly ironic new meaning. He strides out of the room, leaving you and the old man behind. His footsteps echoing urgently down the corridor. You follow, compelled by this new thread in the mystery. He doesn't stop until HES outside, in the cold night air of a small, walled courtyard at the base of the tower. It's the garden. It's barely a garden at all, more of a neglected-looking patch of earth, but you can see immediately that it's not what it seems. This is no simple collection of rosemary and thyme. Even in the gloom, you can identify the tall, elegant stalks of foxglove, its bell-shaped flowers a source of deadly digaskin. You see the feathery, delicate leaves of hemlock, the same plant that killed Socrates. And there, covering the entire back wall and climbing the tower, is the source of the vine at the window, a massive, ancient wisteria. Its seeds known to be poisonous. This was his secret larder, his open-air laboratory. He wasn't just buying these toxic ingredients, he was cultivating them. This discovery adds another layer of premeditation to the entire operation. It's one thing to acquire a pinch of arsenic, it's another thing entirely to patiently cultivate a garden of deadly plants over years. Tending to them, harvesting them, processing them. This speaks to a long-term, sustained commitment. A true dedication to the craft. The history of botanical gardens is deeply intertwined with medicine and, by extension, poison. The first European botanical gardens, established in Italy in the mid-16th century, were Orti Botanicae, medicinal gardens affiliated with universities. Their purpose was to teach medical students how to identify crucial plants for their remedies. But for every healing property a plant possessed, there was often a toxic one. The study of pharmacy, pharmakon in Greek means both drug and poison, was always the study of dosage. What could heal in small amounts could kill in large amounts. The commander's garden was a private, weaponized version of these academic gardens. As you stand there, in the middle of this deceptively beautiful patch of lethality, you notice a strange and quirky detail. In one corner of the garden, growing in a small, carefully tended pot, is a tomato plant. It's laden with bright red, unpicked fruit. This is odd. In 16th century Italy, the tomato, having been recently brought back from the Americas, was widely regarded with suspicion. It was a member of the nightshade family, and many believed it to be poisonous. It was often grown as an ornamental plant, an exotic curiosity, but rarely eaten. People called it the poison apple. Why would a man so knowledgeable about real poisons be cultivating a plant that was only rumored to be poisonous? Historians still debate the reasons for the slow adoption of the tomato into European cuisine. Was it genuine fear due to its resemblance to other toxic nightshades, or was it related to early medical theories about acidic foods? Some even suggest its reputation was harmed because wealthy people ate off pewter plates, and the tomato's high acidity would leach lead from the plate, causing lead poisoning. Whatever the reason, the commander's cultivation of it is ambiguous. Was he, the master of toxins, also afraid of the humble tomato, or was he, perhaps, ahead of his time, secretly aware of its harmlessness and enjoying a private joke at the expense of popular superstition? The sun crouches down, his fingers brushing against the leaves of a monkshood plant, its beautiful purple flowers belying the deadly aconite within. He told me. The sun says softly, his voice thick with a dark nostalgia, that gardening taught him patience, that you cannot rush a seed, you cannot command a root to grow faster. He said it was his lesson in humility. The irony is crushing. The man who learned humility and patience in this garden was using that knowledge to cultivate the tools for the ultimate act of arrogance, the power to decide who lives and who dies. The garden is no longer just a source of ingredients. It's a metaphor for the commander himself, a place where beauty and lethality, patience and ruthlessness, grow side by side, their roots inextricably intertwined. The fire he planned now seems woefully inadequate. How do you burn a garden that has already rooted so deeply in the earth? How do you burn a secret that has been cultivated for a lifetime? Returning from the chilling revelation of the garden, you re-enter the cramped tar room. The air feels even more suffocating now, charged with the knowledge that the commander's dark pursuits extended beyond these stone walls, into the very soil of his home. The sun's plan to burn everything is starting to seem like trying to burn the ocean. The secret is too big, its roots too deep. His gaze is now drawn back to the shelves, but with a new, grim question forming in his mind. It's a question of logistics, a question of science. He picks up a small, sealed clay pot. It's heavy, he shakes it, and a dry, rattling sound comes from within. How did his father know in an era before chemical analysis, before toxicology reports, before the scientific method as we know it? How did one test the efficacy of these substances? How could you be sure that the powdered root you just prepared would cause the desired effect, and not just a mild stomach ache, or worse, have no effect at all? The question hangs in the air, a deeply practical and deeply disturbing one. You are now contemplating one of the most unsettling and least documented aspects of historical poison-making: quality control. For the commander's collection to be anything more than a cabinet of curiosities, for it to be a genuine arsenal, he would have made it a reliable way to test his creations. This wasn't a matter of academic theory, it was a matter of life and death, both for the intended victim and potentially for the poisoner himself if his plan failed and was discovered. The son puts the pot down and his eyes scan the room, searching for an answer. There are no cages, no animal bones, other than the strange ingredients themselves. There's no obvious sign of systematic animal testing. The thought that occurs to you both, unspoken but sickeningly present, is the alternative: human subjects. The history of medicine is filled with uncomfortable stories of physicians and scientists testing remedies on themselves, their servants, or even prisoners. The line between ethical research and monstrous experimentation has always been a shifting one. It's a point of significant debate among historians how exactly these pre-modern scientists and poisoners refine their recipes. Some argue that much of it was based on received wisdom from ancient texts, the works of Diacourcized or Pliny the Elder, which listed known toxic plants. Others suggest a slow, painstaking process of trial and error, perhaps observing the effects of accidental poisonings in the community. And a darker, more cynical view posits that in an age of constant, low-level warfare and a large, transient population of servants, mercenaries, and prisoners, finding discreet volunteers might not have been as difficult as we'd like to imagine. The commander, a man with a private army and absolute authority within his domain, would have had no shortage of opportunities. As you ponder this grim possibility, your eyes fall upon a series of small, leather-bound booklets on a lower shelf, separate from the main cryptographic journal. They look different, less formal. The son notices them at the same time. He picks one up. The cover is unmarked. He opens it. Inside, the script is not the unbreakable cipher. It's plain Italian, in the same sharp hand as the marginal note. But the content is bizarre. It's not a record of experiments. It's a list of animals. Each page is dedicated to one creature: the fox, the bird, the dove, the cock. Beneath each heading is not a description of the animal, but a list of human-like qualities and weaknesses. Under the fox, it reads cunning, but overconfident, easily flattered, prone to greed, weakness for fine wine and complex games of chance. Under the dove appears peaceful, but fiercely protective of its own, trusts too easily, vulnerable through its children and its misplaced sense of piety. Under the boar, driven by rage and appetite, lacks foresight, can be baited with insults and lead into a poorly chosen fight. Strong, but clumsy. It's a bestiary, but it's not a medieval bestiary full of moral allegories and fantastical creatures. This is a psychological bestiary, a tactical analysis of human archetypes, disguised as a study of animals. The commander was just studying chemicals. He was studying people. He was profiling his enemies, his allies, his rivals, breaking them down into their fundamental components, their drives, their fears, their weaknesses. This is a fascinating insight into the Renaissance mind. The ancient idea of the four humors, sanguine, choleric, melancholic, phlegmatic, was still a dominant medical theory, suggesting that personality was dictated by a balance of bodily fluids. The commander's bestiary is a more personalized, more predatory version of this. He wasn't just a proto-chemist, he was a proto-profiler. He believed that if you could understand a person's essential animal nature, you could predict their behavior, and if you could predict their behavior, you could control them. And then you realized the horrifying connection. The poisons weren't just blunt instruments. They were tailored. He wouldn't use the same approach on a fox as he would on a boar. For the boar, a false-acting, rage-inducing substance might be appropriate, something to heighten his natural aggression and lead him to a fatal mistake. For the fox, a slow, subtle poison, administered over weeks through his favorite wine, might be the more elegant solution, something that would cloud his cunning mind, making him paranoid and ineffective. This wasn't just murder. This was bespoke assassination. The laboratory of chemicals and the library of psychological profiles were to hazard the same terrifying weapon system. He wasn't just testing the lethality of his poisons. He was designing them for specific targets, specific personalities, specific weaknesses. The faceless, silent experiment wasn't a nameless servant. It was every powerful man he ever met, dissected and analyzed on the pages of these little books. A potential victim in a war fought not with swords, but with secrets and whispers. The room has just become infinitely more chilling. The discovery of the psychological bestiary changes the entire complexion of the secret room. It's no longer just a workshop for a potential poisoner, it's the nerve center for a master manipulator. The son, holding the small leather-bound book on the fox, looks as if he has been struck. He is seeing a side of his father's intellect that is colder and more calculating than any battle strategy he ever witnessed. This wasn't about rage or revenge. This was a science. He puts the bestiary down in his hand, almost unconsciously, moves towards the one object on the workbench he has so far avoided, the ornate, inlaid books. If the notebooks were his father's mind, these books felt like his father's heart or whatever dark, complicated organ served him in its place. His earlier hesitation is gone, replaced by a grim necessity. He needs to see inside. He picks it up again, examining the Ouroboros symbol on the lid. He runs his thumb over the engraved silver serpent. He presses on it, twists it, slides it. Nothing happens. The box remains sealed. Frustrated, He is about to reach for the crowbar again, to apply the same brute force he used on the door. But then he stops. He remembers the old servant's words about the door. He would place his hand upon the lock, and it would open. He remembers his father's love for intricate mechanisms. Brute force feels wrong. This is a puzzle, and it demands intelligence, not violence. He turns his attention back to the workbench, his eyes scanning the clutter of tools and half-finished experiments. His gaze falls on the main cryptographic journal, the one he had closed in frustration just a short while ago. An idea, a desperate hunch, begins to form. He picks up the journal again. The cover is plain, dark leather. He runs his hand over it. Nothing. He opens it to the first page, to the wall of incomprehensible symbols. He stares at it, willing it to give up its secrets. And then he notices it. A tiny imperfection on the inside of the front cover. A small bump in the leather, almost invisible. He prods it with his fingernail. There's something hard underneath. With a surge of adrenaline, he takes a small, sharp knife on the workbench and carefully, meticulously, slices into the leather lining. He peels it back. Beneath the leather, a small, hidden compartment has been carved into the wooden cover of the book itself, and nestled inside is a single, exquisitely crafted object. It's a key, but it's like no key you have ever seen. It's not made of iron or brass. It appears to be carved from a single piece of dark, polished obsidian, and its head is shaped into a perfect, miniature replica of the Ouroboros serpent on the box. It's not just a key, it's a piece of jewelry. An object of dark beauty. It's a secret hidden within a secret. This passion for concealment and intricate objects was a hallmark of the wealthy and powerful in the Renaissance. They commissioned not just art and architecture, but also Kunstkammer or cabinets of curiosities. These were entire rooms filled with a mix of natural wonders, natural IIA, man-made marvels, artificial IAA, scientific instruments, scientific AE, and ethnographic objects, exotica, a secret key, carved from a rare mineral. Opening a puzzle box, this would be a prized piece of artificial IAA, a testament to the owner's sophistication, intellect, and obsession with secrecy. It was a private performance of genius. The son takes the obsidian key. Its surface cool and smooth against his skin. He walks back to the box. He finds a tiny, almost invisible hole in the center of the engraved silver serpent, the serpent's eye. The key fits perfectly. He turns it. There is no loud, mechanical clunk. Instead, a series of soft, Internal clicks, like the sound of a well-oiled clock. A section of the lid slides back, revealing not the contents of the box, but a set of small, ivory dials, each etched with symbols the signs of the zodiac. It's another lock, a combination lock. A wave of despair washes over the sun. It's an endless, infuriating nesting doll of secrets. But then he looks at the dials, zodiac signs. He thinks back to the cryptographic journal, to the recurring symbols he couldn't understand. Astrological signs were scattered throughout the text. His father, the ultimate pragmatist, the master strategist, was also an astrologer. He frantically flips through the cryptographic journal again, searching for a clue. He doesn't know what he is looking for. A date, a specific alignment of planets. Then he finds it, on the very last page of the journal, separate from the coded text, is a beautifully drawn astrological chart. It's a natal chart, a map of the heavens at the moment of a person's birth. At the top of the page, in plain Latin, is a name and a date. It's the commander's own name and his date of birth. The chart shows the positions of the sun, the moon, and the planets. The sun in Leo, the moon in Scorpio, Mars rising in Aries. With trembling fingers, the sun begins to turn the ivory dials on the box, aligning the markers to the positions on his father's natal chart. Leo, Scorpio, Aries. As the last dial clicks into place, there's a soft, satisfying thump from within the box. He slides the lid open. The inside is lined with faded red velvet, and nestled in carefully carved compartments are not more poisons, not gold, but a collection of books. They are very old, much older than the commander himself. Their leather bindings are cracked. Their pages are yellowed, and the script is not Italian, but Arabic and Greek. And on the spine of the largest one, in faded gold leaf, is a single, chilling title, Picatrix. The sun stares at it, his blood turning to ice. This is not alchemy. This is not herbalism. The Picatrix is one of the most infamous and dangerous books of astral magic in history. A Grimoire, a textbook for summoning spirits and channeling the power of the planets for personal gain. His father wasn't just a poisoner or a spy master, he was trying to become a maid. And the books he collected, they were not just a hobby. They were forbidden knowledge in its purest, most damnable form. The name Picatrix hangs in the air, heavier and more menacing than any poison in the room. This single word redefines the entire discovery. The son, who had wrestled with the idea of his father as a chemist, a prophet, and an alchemist, is now confronted with a far more terrifying identity, a ceremonial magician, a sorcerer. This wasn't science. Not even the blurred science of the Renaissance. This was a direct and deliberate engagement with the demonic, the forbidden, the heretical. He reaches into the box and lifts out the book. It feels ancient, the leather dry and fragile beneath his fingertips. The Picatrix is not just one book, but a composite of 4 books, originally written in Arabic in the 10th or 11th century under the title Jihayat al-Hakim, or the Goal of the Wise. It was translated into Spanish and then Latin in the 13th century, and from there it circulated in secret, hand-copied manuscripts among a very niche, very brave, or very foolish, group of scholars and occultists. It's a comprehensive guide to talismancy and astral magic, a how-to manual for harnessing the occult properties of planets, stars, plants, and minerals to achieve specific effects, to gain love, to find treasure, to destroy one's enemies. To earn a copy was to risk excommunication at best, and a trial for witchcraft at worst. The son gently lays the book on the workbench, as if it might burn him. He doesn't open it. He doesn't mean to. Simply possessing it is a capital crime against God and the Church. His gaze turns to the other books in the box. One is a Greek manuscript. He can't read the language, but he recognizes the style of the text from his classical tutors. It could be anything, but in this context, it's likely a Neoplatonic text. perhaps from a philosopher like Alcibiades or Porphyry, who wrote extensively on the nature of the soul, the gods, and the practice of the Urgy, a form of high magic, aimed at communicating with divine beings. This wasn't just about cursing enemies, it was about ascending to a higher state of being. This discovery highlights a deep intellectual struggle at the heart of the Renaissance. It was an age obsessed with antiquity, with rediscovering the lost wisdom of the Greeks and Romans. Scholars known as humanists painstakingly translated texts by Plato, Cicero, and Virgil, but alongside these celebrated philosophical and literary works came another shadow library, the hermetic and magical texts of late antiquity. Figures like Marsilio Ficino, a priest and one of the most influential philosophers of the Florentine Renaissance, famously translated the Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of texts attributed to the legendary sage Hermes Trismegistus. Here lies a great debate among historians: how did men like Ficino and perhaps the commander reconcile their Christian faith with their deep interest in pagan magic and philosophy? Ficino argued that this ancient theology was a parallel revelation, a Gentile's version of the wisdom God gave to Moses, and that it could be used to deepen one's Christian faith. The church, for the most part, disagreed. They saw it as a dangerous path that led directly to demonology. The commander, it seemed, was walking that very path, but without Ficino's philosophical justifications. His was a far more practical, and therefore more dangerous, application of the forbidden arts. The Somme is visibly shaken. He now understands the extreme secrecy, the layers of locks and codes. This wasn't just about hiding a politically dangerous hobby. This was about hiding his very soul from damnation. The psychological bestiaries, the poison garden, the alchemical experiments, they were all part of a larger, terrifying project. He was trying to master the hidden world, to become a man who could command not just armies of flesh and blood, but the very forces of the cosmos. You notice something else inside the box, tucked beneath the books. It's a small, velvet pouch. The sun picks it up. It links softly. He loosens the drawstring and tips the contents into his palm. Out roll a dozen or so talismans. They are not the crude charms of a village witch. These are exquisitely crafted objects, made according to the precise astrological instructions laid out in the Picatrix. One is a silver disc, engraved with the sigil of Venus, meant to be forged on a Friday during the first hour of daylight, when the planet Venus is rising. It's embedded with a small, perfectly green emerald. Another is made of lead, heavy and cold, stamped with the grim symbol of Saturn, designed to bring ruin and despair to an enemy. There's a third, made of a strange alloy of 7 metals, covered in symbols you don't recognize. Each one is a tiny, concentrated prayer of power, a physical vessel for a specific magical intention. This is no longer theoretical. He was practicing it. He was creating these objects. And here's a quirky, almost comical detail from the Picatrix itself that illustrates the strangeness of this world. Some of the recipes for these magical operations were notoriously disgusting and bizarre. To create a talisman to destroy a city, for instance, the book instructs the magician to use a mixture of dust from a graveyard, tar, and the blood of a black crow, all while chanting invocations to the destructive spirit of Mars. The commander, a man of refined tastes and immense dignity, would have had to debase himself to engage in these strange and grotesque rituals, all in the pursuit of this hidden power. You try to picture him, the great general, alone in this tower at night, surrounded by foul-smelling concoctions, muttering incantations to the stars. The image is both terrifying and absurd. The sun sweeps the talismans back into the pouch as if they are scorpions. The discovery of the books was an intellectual shock. The talismans are physical proof of active practice. The leap from theory to action is a chasm, and his father had clearly jumped across it. The question is no longer just what did he know, it is now, what did he do? The weight of the Picatrix and the cold reality of the talismans seemed to suck all the air from the room. The sun stands frozen, staring at the open box. A Pandora's box that has unleashed not just poisons and secrets, but cosmic ambitions and heretical practices. What was he chasing? What was the ultimate goal of this decades-long clandestine obsession? Was it merely a more exotic weapon in his political arsenal? Or was it something far grander, far more personal? He turns away from the workbench and begins to pace the small, circular room, his footsteps echoing the frantic, trapped pattern of his thoughts. HES trying to connect the dots, to draw a line from the ruthless, pragmatic commander he knew to the hermetic mage revealed in this tower. And as he paces, his eyes fall again upon the shelves, not at the poisons this time, but at the other books, the ones not hidden in the box. He pulls one down. It's a treatise on alchemy. Its pages filled with the familiar, cryptic symbols for salt, sulfur, and mercury. But as he flips through it, he sees that the commander's annotations in the margins are not just about chemical processes. HES underline passages about transmutation, but not just of lead into gold. HES marked sections that discuss the purification of the soul, the creation of the elixir of life, the achievement of immortality. This is the central duality of alchemy, a point that historians and scholars of esotericism still argue about fiercely. Was alchemy a proto-science, a fumbling, early attempt at chemistry focused on material gain, or was it primarily a spiritual practice, a complex allegory for the refinement of the human spirit? Where the lead was the alchemist's stone-based soul and the gold was spiritual enlightenment or reunion with God. This is often called the spiritual alchemy versus operative alchemy debate. The truth is, for many practitioners, it was both at the same time. They believed the physical and spiritual worlds were inextricably linked. Purifying metals was a way of purifying the self, and vice versa. It seems, was interested in both. The Sun finds a section describing the magnum opus, the great work of alchemy, which was said to have 12 stages, often named after zodiac signs or colors, the Nigiri-Duri-Du, or blackening the albedo, or whitening the rubdu, or reddening. In the margin, his father has written a simple, chilling question in Italian quanto tempo, how much time? The question reveals a profound anxiety. This wasn't a leisurely philosophical pursuit. This was a race. A race against what? Against his enemies or against his own mortality. The Sun puts the alchemy book down and picks up another. This one is on metallurgy, a practical manual on smelting and casting metals. It seems out of place until he realizes its connection to the talismans. To create a talisman for Jupiter, you need a tin for Mars. Pion, you had to know how to work these metals, how to purify them, how to engrave them at the precise, astrologically determined moment. The science of metallurgy was a necessary prerequisite for the art of magic. And then you notice a small, unassuming detail, a bit of quirky trivia from the history of science. Tucked between a serious text on mineralogy and a copy of Pliny the Elder is a small, cheap-looking pamphlet. It's a printed work, not a hand-copied manuscript. And the title is something like On the Marvelous Properties of the Bezoar Stone. A bezoar stone was a real object of concretion, like a herbal, found in the stomach of certain animals, most famously the bezoar goat. For centuries, these stones were considered a universal antidote to poison. They were incredibly rare and astronomically expensive. A king might wear one in a ring or have it set into a goblet, ready to be dipped into any suspicious drink. The funny thing is, they sometimes actually worked. The chemical composition of a bezoar stone could, in some cases, absorb certain chemical compounds, like arsenic. It was a case of folklore stumbling upon a genuine, if limited, scientific principle. The commander's interest in this is telling. Amidst all his complex, offensive magical and chemical research, he was also hedging his bets. He was studying how to poison others, but he was also desperately researching how to save himself. It speaks to the deep, pervasive paranoia of his world. He was a spider spinning a web, but he was also terrified of the other spiders. The Sun stops his pacing. He's beginning to see the shape of it now. It's not one single obsession, but 3 intertwined pursuits, all aimed at a single goal: control. The poisons and the psychological bestiary were for controlling his enemies in the present. On the physical plane, the magic, the summoning of spirits and the channeling of planetary energies, was for controlling his fate, for bending the future to his will. And the alchemy, with its promise of the elixir of life, was for the ultimate control, the conquest of death itself. He was just trying to be a powerful man. He was trying to become something more, something permanent, in an age of plagues, wars, and sudden, violent death. Where life was fragile and fortunes could be reversed overnight, he was engaged in a desperate, secret war against impermanence. The gold he sought wasn't the kind you could hold in a treasury. It was the incorruptible, eternal gold of the philosophers. He wasn't just trying to avoid defeat on the battlefield, he was trying to defeat time itself. The sun looks at the chaotic collection of books, poisons, and charms. It's not the laboratory of a madman. It's the sanctuary of a man terrified of his own fragility. The ambition is breathtaking, but the fear behind it is profoundly, tragically human. He wanted to live forever. He wanted to become a god. And in the end, he died in his bed, his breath growing shallow, just like any other mortal man. The grand, cosmic project had failed. The revelation of the commander's triple-pronged quest for control over his enemies, his fate, and death itself settles in the room like a physical weight. The son's anger and fear are now mixed with a strange, bitter pity for his father's colossal, secret failure. But as he stands there, amidst the debris of this failed ambition, a new, more pragmatic concern begins to surface. His gaze falls once more upon the Picatrix. He doesn't have to be a theologian to understand the gravity of this book. Its very presence in the castle is a profound liability. The Italian peninsula was the heartland of the Catholic Church, and while the Renaissance saw a flourishing of humanistic thought, the power of the Inquisition was growing, not shrinking. This was the era of the Malleus Maleficum, or the Hammer of Witches, a terrifyingly influential treatise on how to prosecute witches. Suspicions of heresy and witchcraft were potent political weapons. If a rival family or a suspicious bishop were to learn of this room's existence, it would mean the utter ruin of his family. Their lands would be confiscated, their name disgraced, and they would be lucky to escape with their lives. He runs a hand over his face, the enormity of the risk sinking in. This was just about his father's soul, it was about the survival of his entire lineage. He thinks about the church's official stance on these matters. The lines were often blurry and politically motivated, but some things were unequivocally condemned. The distinction between natural magic and demonic magic was crucial. Natural magic, as explored by philosophers like Ficino, was the study of occult sympathies and correspondences in nature, using a specific herb on a specific day to channel the benign influence of a planet. For instance, it was controversial, and the church was wary of it, but it could sometimes be argued as an extension of natural philosophy. Demonic magic, on the other hand, involved the explicit invocation of demons, angels, or spirits to compel them to do one's bidding. The Picatrix, with its detailed instructions for summoning and its morally ambiguous goals, fell squarely and spectacularly into the latter category. It was, in the eyes of the church, a textbook for making pacts with devils. The debate over what constituted acceptable knowledge was a defining feature of the era. Universities had official curricula, but a shadow curriculum always existed. For instance, the study of anatomy was progressing rapidly, but human dissection was still heavily restricted and viewed with suspicion by many. Likewise, astronomy was a respectable science, but the moment it crossed into astrology to predict the future, it became a forbidden art. The commander's library was a collection of these forbidden arts, a syllabus from a university of damnation. He thinks about the political landscape. His father had many enemies who would leap at the chance to use such a scandal against him. A rival Condottieri, a resentful merchant family in a nearby town, even factions within the larger powers of Milan or Venice. All it would take is one whisper, one disgruntled servant's testimony, and the inquisitors would be at the gates. The plan to burn everything suddenly seems not just wise, but desperately urgent. As he contemplates the fire, a small, almost laughable detail from the Picatrix itself comes to mind. You recall reading a translation of a passage once, a quirky bit of magical advice. The book contains not just grand rituals for power, but also surprisingly domestic and petty spells. There's a recipe for a magical ink that, when used to write a letter, is supposed to make the recipient fall in love with you. There's another for a talisman that is supposed to make you unbeatable at chess. It's a strange mix of the cosmic and the trivial. The commander, a man who moved armies and schemed for control of entire regions, had in his possession a book that also taught him how to cheat at board games. It's a detail that underscores the all-encompassing nature of this magical worldview. No aspect of life was too small to be manipulated by the hidden forces of the universe. This thought is interrupted by a sound from the doorway. The old servant, who has been standing by, pale and silent, finally speaks. His voice is a dry whisper. "My lord, the book you hold, I have seen its like before." The sun freezes. "What did you say?" "Years ago," the old man continues, his eyes wide with a fear that is decades old. "When I was a boy, in my home village, the priest found such a book in the home of a woman, a healer. They called her a witch. They burned her, and the book, they said it was a gateway, and that to read it was to invite the devil into your mind." The servant's story is not just an anecdote, it's a stark reminder of the reality outside this tower. For the intellectual elite, these books might be a subject of philosophical debate, a dangerous but fascinating avenue of inquiry. For the common person, and for the local parish priest, the distinction was far simpler. It was black and white. It was God versus the devil, good versus evil. There was no room for nuance. The old servant's raw, folk-level terror is a more potent warning than any theological treatise. The son looks from the servant's terrified face to the ancient book in his hands. The fire is the only answer. It has to be. He can't risk it. He can't allow this poison to infect his own future. He looks around the room, at the shelves of chemicals, the garden of toxins, the library of forbidden law. It's an entire ecosystem of heresy. He has to destroy the evidence. He has to wipe this part of his father from existence. His resolve hardens. The debate is over. The decision has been made. The fire will cleanse it all. The son's face is set in a grim, determined mask. But as he looks around the room, a new, more somber realization dawns on him. This isn't just about destroying evidence. This is about reassessing his own past, his own memories of the man who was his father. With the terrible knowledge of this room as a new lens, the past begins to shift and warp, its colors changing, its shadows deepening. He starts to pace again, but this time it's not with the frantic energy of fear, but the slow, heavy tread of someone walking through a graveyard of memories. He thinks back to his childhood. He remembers his father's rivals, the other great Condottieri. He recalls names, faces, men who had been at the height of their power one year, only to be gone the next. The official stories were always plausible, mundane even. A sudden fever, a hunting accident, a political miscalculation that led to a quiet, forced retirement. But now, he re-examines them. He thinks of Francesco, the brilliant CNC captain, who was his father's chief rival for a lucrative contract with Florence. Francesco was known for his sharp mind and cautious strategy. Then, at a crucial moment, he launched a reckless, ill-conceived attack and his army was routed. The story at the time was that he had grown arrogant. But the son now remembers his father's psychological bestiary, the entry on the bull, who could be baited with insults into a clumsy rage. He remembers seeing a new, strange, reddish powder in one of his father's alchemy jars around that time. Could a subtle chemical agent, something to induce aggression or cloud judgment, have been administered? The thought is sickening. This brings up a fascinating area of historical what if. We often attribute historical events to grand political and economic forces, or to the clear-cut decisions of great men. But what about the hidden variables, the micro-histories? Historians are increasingly interested in how factors like health, psychology, and even diet affected major historical figures. The idea that a secret, targeted campaign of chemical or psychological warfare could have altered the course of these minor Italian conflicts is a tantalizing and deeply unsettling possibility. It's a field where definitive proof is almost impossible to find, leaving it in the realm of perpetual and controversial speculation. The son's mind drifts to another memory. A delegation from a rival city come to negotiate a truce. They had dinner in the great hall. His father was a charming host, full of wit and generosity. The wine flowed freely. The son, just a boy then, was allowed to stay and watch. He remembers his father proposing a toast from a special, ornate silver goblet, a cup reserved only for him. He offered the lead negotiator a drink from it, a gesture of great honor. The man accepted. The truce was signed the next day, on terms incredibly favorable to his father. The negotiator seemed subdued. He died 2 years later, of what the physicians called a wasting sickness. At the time, it was a triumph of his father's diplomacy. Now, the son sees the scene with new eyes. He sees the special goblet, not as a symbol of honor, but as a tool. He thinks of the lead-tailed mushrooms of Saturn, designed to bring ruin and despair. He thinks of slow-acting poisons like aquatophané. The whispers he had dismissed as the sour grapes of the defeated now sound like accurate intelligence reports. He had been living his entire life in the sunlit upper rooms of the castle, while this dark engine of power hummed away in the foundations, secretly shaping the reality he took for granted. He even re-evaluates his own childhood. He remembers being sick once, with a terrible fever. The castle physician had given him up for lost, but his father had dismissed the doctor, locked himself in his chambers for a night, and emerged with a small vial of a bitter, dark liquid. He had forced the son to drink it. The fever broke by morning. At the time, it was a miracle, a sign of his father's fierce, protective love. Now, he wonders, what was in that vial? Was it a genuine, brilliantly concocted herbal remedy, a product of the same research that produced the poisons, or was it something else, an alchemical elixir? A desperate gamble using his forbidden knowledge to save his own bloodline. The memory, once a source of comfort, is now tainted with ambiguity and fear. You see a quirky, almost mundane detail that clicks into place for the son. He remembers his father had a peculiar habit. Before any major decision, a battle, a treaty, a marriage alliance, he would retreat, not to the chapel to pray, but to his library, where he would consult what the son always assumed were history books or maps. But he would always burn a specific, pungent-smelling incense, a mix of sandalwood and something else, something sharp and resinous. He called it his thinking incense. Now, the son recognizes the scent. It's the same smell that clings to the Picatrix and the magical talismans. Dragon's blood resin, a key ingredient in rituals of clarification and divination. His father wasn't just thinking. He was scrying. He was trying to read the future. Every major decision of their house, every twist and turn of their family's fortune, was guided not just by strategy, but by astrology and ritual magic. The past has been irrevocably poisoned. The foundations of his life, his wealth, his very identity, are built on a bedrock of secrets and horrors he never suspected. The man he idolized, the pillar of strength and strategy, has been replaced by a far more complex and terrifying figure, a sorcerer king ruling from a tower of poisons. The urge to burn it all is no longer just about self-preservation. It's an act of rebellion, an attempt to break the spell his father has held over his life, even from beyond the grave. He needs to erase this legacy to have any hope of building his own. The weight of the revised past presses down on the son, and his resolve to burn the tower's contents solidifies into a physical need, an urge to act. But as he glances around the room, his eyes fall on the shelves of exotic ingredients, and a new, Practical problem emerges: where did all of this come from? The garden supplied the botanicals, and some minerals could be sourced locally from apothecaries or pigment grinders. But what about the truly rare items? The powdered mummy, the strange resins from the east, the highly purified arsenic. This was a one-man operation. His father was a meticulous man. If he had a network, he would have kept records. The son's gaze sweeps the room again, looking for another hidden book, another ledger. He finds nothing on the shelves. He checks under the workbench, behind stacks of dusty glass beakers. Then, inside a large, empty ceramic vat used for distillation, he finds it a slim portfolio bound in soft kidskin leather. He opens it. Inside, protected by sheets of oiled paper, is a collection of letters. They are not in his father's hand. The script is varied, some elegant and flowing, others rough and barely legible. The letters are from different cities: Venice, Genoa, Alexandria, even a few from as far away as Damascus. Misses it. This is the supply chain. He pulls out the first letter. It's from a merchant in Venice, the great maritime crossroads of the world. The language is guarded, full of coded pleasantries and business euphemisms. But the meaning is clear enough. The merchant discusses a recent shipment of fine red pigments on Cypriot glass, but the quantities and prices are wildly inflated. The son realizes red pigments is likely a code for real gar, a toxic arsenic sulfide, and Cypriot glass could refer to any number of alchemical substances. This letter is a perfect example of how clandestine trade operated in the Renaissance. Venice was the gateway to the East, and its merchants were famously pragmatic, more interested in profit than in moral or religious scruples. They would trade with anyone, in anything. Historians have uncovered evidence of a thriving black market for everything from forbidden books to magical ingredients, often hidden within legitimate cargo. A shipment of spices from Alexandria might have a few illicitly harvested mandrake roots ducked in the bottom of a sack. A crate of textiles from Damascus could have a small, carefully wrapped package of powdered serpent venom hidden in its folds. The commander was leveraging these vast, international trade networks for his own dark purposes. The son reads another letter, this one from Genoa, written in a much cruder hand. It speaks of a deal for Liguerian curiosities, and complains about the difficulty of acquiring a certain type of mountain cat. The son is puzzled until he remembers an old folk belief. The lynx, a mountain cat found in the Ligurian hills, was believed to have urine that would crystallize into a precious stone with magical properties. This, of course, is pure myth, a story repeated by ancient authors like Pliny, but it shows the commander wasn't just dealing with sophisticated urban merchants. He was also tapping into a network of rural hunters, poachers, and folk magicians, people who trafficked in superstition and local lore. His network was both high-tech and low-tech, spanning the globe from the great ports of the Levant to the remote forests of his own backyard. He finds a third letter that is even more disturbing. It's from a man in Alexandria, and the tone is scholarly, almost academic. The writer discusses the difficulty of obtaining well-preserved canopic jars and complains about the local authorities becoming more vigilant. The implication is chilling. The commander wasn't just buying powdered mummy from a merchant, he was directly or indirectly commissioning the desecration of ancient Egyptian to acquire specific magical components. This was a level of commitment that went far beyond mere dabbling. He was an active, high-level player in a dangerous and illegal international market. There is a fascinating and somewhat morbid quirk of history. Here the use of mummy or mumia in European medicine. For centuries, powdered Egyptian mummy was a common ingredient in apothecary shops. It was prescribed for everything from headaches to epilepsy. Most of what was sold was fraudulent, often the dried flesh of recently executed criminals or unclaimed bodies from hospitals, passed off as ancient Egyptian royalty. But there was a genuine raid in real mummies, looted from tombs and shipped to Europe. The commander, with his demand for well-preserved canopic jars, was clearly seeking the authentic article, believing it held more potent magical power. As the sun sifts through these letters, a picture emerges of a hidden world, a secret fraternity of collectors, dealers, and seekers. They are a diverse group: cynical merchants, desperate poachers, heretical scholars. They communicate in code, they take immense risks, and they supply the raw materials for the darkest ambitions of men like his father. Whether these suppliers truly believed in the power of what they sold, or if they were just exploiting the obsessions of a wealthy and powerful client, is a question that lingers. The letters hint at both. The Venetian sounds like a pure opportunist. The man in Alexandria writes with the passion of a fellow believer. The sun puts the portfolio of letters aside. The fire is no longer enough. The network is still out there. These people know who his father was, what he was buying. They are loose ends. Dangerous loose ends. The secret of the tower is not contained within its walls. It has tendrils that reach across the sea. Destroying the room will hide the physical evidence, but it won't erase the knowledge held by these shadowy figures. The inheritance is not just a collection of dangerous objects, but a web of dangerous relationships. And he has no idea who is at the other end of the threads. The discovery of the international supply network adds a terrifying new dimension to the problem. The secret isn't a static object that can be burned, it's a living, breathing entity with contacts all over the known world. The sun feels a fresh wave of paranoia wash over him. Who are these people? Do they have other clients? What do they know? And who might they tell? His plan to simply erase the past now seems naive. He needs more information. He turns his attention back to the primary cryptographic journal, the one he had abandoned after finding the key to the box. He had assumed its purpose was to hide recipes and rituals. But what if it contained more? What if it held the key to this human network as well? He lays the heavy book on the workbench, its coded pages seeming to mock him with their silence. The task of deciphering it seems impossible. He's not a cryptographer. He has no idea where to even begin. He stares at the dense script, a jumble of symbols, numbers, and strange letters. It's overwhelming. HE's about to give up again when he remembers the small, humanizing detail HED found earlier, the marginal note about a failed experiment. Folly matter. Patience is the principal virtue. It was his father's mantra in the garden, and it seems it was his mantra here, too. He decides to take a different approach. He won't try to crack the entire cipher. He'll look for patterns, for recognizable elements that might serve as a foothold. He remembers the psychological bestiary, where his father classified men as animals: the fox, the bear, the dove. Perhaps he used the same system here. He starts scanning the pages, not for words, but for drawings. After several minutes of fruitless searching, he finds one. In the margin of a long, coded entry, there is a tiny, exquisitely detailed drawing of a wolf's head. Next to the wolf's head is a series of astrological symbols, Mars in conjunction with Saturn, and a string of numbers. Below it is another coded entry. A few pages later, another drawing, a peacock, proud and elegant. It's accompanied by different symbols: Venus and the sun, and another block of code. He has found a ledger. This isn't just a recipe book, it's a record of operations. The animal drawings are the targets, the same archetypes from his bestiary. The astrological symbols likely denote the timing of the operation, the lucky or unlucky day chosen for the attempt. And the coded text, that must be the details, the method, the ingredients, the outcome. And what about the names, the real names? It would be foolish to write them down, even in code. The sun is about to despair when he notices that next to each animal drawing, there's also a small, unique geometric shape: a triangle with a dot in it, a square with a cross, a circle inside a circle. It's another layer of abstraction, another security measure. But where is the key to these symbols? This is where historical cryptography gets fascinating. It wasn't just about substituting letters. Renaissance masters used multiple techniques in the same message: substitution, transposition, code words like red pigments, and nulls, meaningless characters designed to confuse code breakers. Some even use symbols and geometric shapes. a practice that blurs the line between cryptography and the magical use of sigils. Historians still debate whether some of these symbolic systems were purely mathematical ciphers, or if they were imbued with esoteric meaning, believing the shapes themselves held power. The sun searches the room, his eyes darting everywhere. The key must be here. It would be reckless to keep it anywhere else. He looks at the workbench, at the shelf, nothing. He looks at the floor, the walls. He even runs his hand along the inside of the cold, dead brazier. Then he looks up. Carved into the soot-blackened stone of the chimney flue, almost invisible against the dark background, are a series of symbols. A triangle with a dot, a square with a cross, a circle inside a circle, and next to each one, a name, not a full name, but an initial or a well-known monogram. G, S, next to the wolf, F, DM, next to the peacock, C, B, next to a drawing of a spider he hadn't noticed before. His blood runs cold. He recognizes the monograms. They are some of the most powerful men in Italy. G, S, is Giovanni Sforza, the ruler of Piazza. F, DM, is Francesco de' Medici, a prince of Florence. C, is Cesare Borgia. This isn't a list of minor rivals or troublesome business associates. This is a hit list, or, more accurately, a list of targets some perhaps already dealt with, some potential future victims. It's a roster of the rich, the famous, and the powerful, and his father had been tracking them, analyzing them, and, in all likelihood, using his dark arts against them. This discovery is a bombshell. It elevates the commander from a paranoid, ambitious man into a player in the great game of Italian politics on a scale the Sun had never imagined. He wasn't just defending his small territory, he was actively intervening in the power struggles of the great dynasties. Was he doing this for his own gain, or was he working for someone else? Was he a king in his own right? Well, a pawn, an incredibly powerful and dangerous pawn, but a pawn nonetheless. And here's a quirky, dark detail about the man on that list, Cesare Borgia. He himself was a notorious and feared figure, with a reputation for ruthlessness that matched or even surpassed the commandos. The Borgia family's name was so synonymous with poison that a legend arose about their cantarella. But here, on this secret list, Cesare Borgia is not the predator. He is the prey. He is the spider, being analyzed targeted by another, even more secretive predator. It's a stunning reversal of the popular narrative. A glimpse into a secret war of shadows fought between the era's most dangerous men, a war that history books have no record of. The Sun feels a dizzying sense of vertigo. He has stumbled into a conspiracy that is far beyond his understanding. This isn't just a family secret anymore. This is a state secret, or perhaps multiple state secrets. The fire seems like a pathetically inadequate response. Burning this room would intend the danger. It would be like burning a single map while the war still rages all around you. He has inherited not just a box of poisons, but a place at the table of the most dangerous game in Europe, and he doesn't even know the rules. The names carved into the chimney flue are a revelation of terrifying scope. The Sun feels as if the floor has dropped out from under him. This is no longer a matter of personal sin or family disgrace. This is high treason. He is standing in a room that holds the potential to destabilize kingdoms. As he stares at the monogram Sforza, Medici, Borgia, he feels a profound sense of inadequacy. He is a soldier, trained in tactics and logistics. He is not a spy. He is not a master of intrigue. He is a lamb who has just discovered his father was a wolf, and that the forest is full of other, even bigger wolves. He slumps down onto a small wooden stool, the only piece of furniture in the room besides the workbench. He buries his face in his hands, the rough leather of his gloves pressing against his temples. The sheer weight of the discoveries is crushing him. The poisons, the magic, the international network, the hit list. It's too much, and in this moment of overwhelming stress, his gaze falls upon the workbench again, and he sees the evidence of something new failure. Not the philosophical failure he'd seen noted in the coded journal, but tangible, physical failure. He notices a large, dark scorch mark on the thick wood of the bench, radiating out from where the cold brazier now sits. Near the scorch mark, there's a spatter pattern of what looks like melted glass, fused to the surface of the wood. On the shore below, he sees the shattered remains of a heavy glass alembic, the co-component of a distillation apparatus. He pieces together the scene. His father, the great, meticulous commander, had an accident. A distillation gone wrong. Perhaps the temperature had gotten too high, the pressure built up, and the vessel exploded, spewing hot, probably corrosive, liquid across the bench and shattering on the floor. It was a clumsy, dangerous mistake. A moment of inattention or miscalculation that could have blinded him or set the entire tower on fire. This small scene of domestic disaster is incredibly humanizing. It cuts through the myth of the infallible sorcerer king he has been building in his mind. His father was not a god, communing effortlessly with cosmic forces. He was a man, in a room, messing with chemicals he didn't fully understand. And sometimes, he got it wrong. Sometimes, he was just a clumsy amateur. This speaks to a broader truth about the history of science. We celebrate the great successes, the discoveries, the breakthroughs, but for every success, there were 1,000 failures, 1,000 dead ends, 1,000 lab explosions. The path of knowledge is paved with mistakes. Alchemists, in their secretive and often poorly ventilated labs, faced constant risks. They worked with toxic substances like mercury and arsenic, inhaling their fumes. They dealt with unpredictable chemical reactions. The image of the wise, bearded alchemist is a romantic one. The reality was often a dangerous and messy business. The scorch mark on the bench is a testament to that messy reality. The son gets up and walks over to the bench, running his fingers over the rough, scorched wood. He can almost picture the scene: his father, cursing in frustration, swatting at a small fire, his face grim with the knowledge of his own incompetence. This glimpse of his father's fallibility gives the son a strange, unexpected surge of connection. It's not pity, exactly. It's a shared sense of human limitation. His father, for all his terrifying ambition, was still bound by the same physical laws as everyone else. He could still mess up. He then notices another, even stranger sign of failure. In a dusty corner, there is a small pile of twisted, misshapen metal objects. They look like rejected talismans. One is a lead disc, the symbol of Saturn stamped on it off-center and blurry. Another is a silver ring that has been bent and hammered almost flat, as if in a fit of pique. It's the kind of frustrated debris any craftsman would produce: the painter's discarded sketches, the poet's crumpled up drafts. This is a wonderful, quirky insight into the practice of magic. According to texts like the Picatrix, a magical talisman wasn't just about carving the right symbol on the right metal. It had to be done at a precise astrological time, with the correct mindset, and with the proper incantations. If any element was off, if the time was wrong, if your concentration wavered, if you smudged the engraving, the talisman was useless, or worse, could produce an unintended, negative effect. It required absolute perfection, and his father, evidently, did not always achieve it. He had bad days. He made duds. The son picks up the mangled silver ring. He can imagine his father, having spent hours preparing, waiting for the exact moment when Jupiter was rising, only to have his hand slip with the engraving tool. The frustration must have been immense. It's almost comical. He was a man trying to bend the cosmos to his will, and he was being defeated by a clumsy mistake, a moment of human error. The gap between his ambition and his ability was, at times, a chasm. This collection of failures, the exploded alembic, the botched talismans, doesn't make the commander less dangerous. In some ways, it makes him more so. It suggests him, and driven by a frustration so profound that he would refuse to give up, no matter the setbacks. It paints a picture of obsessive perseverance. But it also demystifies him. It strips away the aura of supernatural mastery and reveals the sweating, striving, sometimes failing man underneath. The son feels a subtle shift in his own perspective. The crushing weight of his father's legacy feels, for the first time, a little bit lighter. He is not dealing with a demon or a demigod. He is dealing with the legacy of a man. A brilliant, ambitious, terrifying, and deeply flawed man. And a man, he realizes, can be understood. They man can, perhaps, even be forgiven. The idea of the fire still seems necessary, but the motivation has changed. It's less about terrified erosure and more about a sad, compassionate closing of a chapter, by final act of cleaning up after his father's beautiful, terrible, and ultimately failed mess. The image of his father as a fallible, striving human, rather than an infallible sorcerer, brings a strange sense of clarity to the son. The fear, while still present, is no longer paralyzing. He can breathe again. And as he breathes, he starts to think not just about the man his father was, but about the world that created him. Why would a man of such immense practical power, a successful general, a respected ruler, feel the need to retreat into this world of shadows and secrets? He looks around the tower room, at the tools of alchemy, astrology, and poison, and he sees them not just as weapons, but as symptoms of a deep, pervasive anxiety that plagued their entire era. The Renaissance, for all its glorious art and intellectual rebirth, was a time of profound uncertainty and existential dread. It was an age of beautiful surfaces and terrifying depths. You can feel this anxiety in the very air of the 15th and 16th centuries. The foundations of the medieval world were crumbling. The singular authority of the Catholic Church was being challenged by humanism, by political cynicism, and soon, by the Protestant Reformation. The old certainties were gone. The Black Death had ripped through Europe a century before, and its ghost still haunted the collective psyche, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the seeming randomness of God's will. Mere diseases, like syphilis, were appearing, spreading terror and confusion. Warfare was also changing, becoming more brutal and unpredictable. The chivalric code of the medieval knight was being rendered obsolete by cannons, gunpowder, and the disciplined pike formations of mercenary armies. It was a world in flux, a world where the old rules no longer seemed to apply. For a man like the commander, whose entire life was about control, living in such a chaotic world must have been a private, daily torment. This is a point historians often emphasize when trying to understand the early modern obsession with the occult. The turn towards magic, alchemy, and astrology wasn't necessarily a rejection of faith or reason. For many, it was a desperate attempt to find a new system of control, a new set of rules in a universe that seemed to have abandoned them. If the old religious framework could no longer guarantee salvation or protection, perhaps a new, secret knowledge could. If a man's fate was written in the stars, as astrologers claimed, then learning to read those stars was a rational response to uncertainty. It was a way of trying to get a peek at God's playbook. The son thinks about the political climate his father navigated. The Italian peninsula was a viper's nest of shifting alliances. A friend one day could be an enemy the next. Popes waged wars. Kings invaded, and cities betrayed one another. The commander had to live with the constant threat of assassination, betrayal, and sudden political ruin. His paranoia, which fueled the creation of this very room, was not a sign of madness. It was a survival strategy. His secret studies were his attempt to find an edge. Any edge. In a game with no rules and no referees. And then there was the intellectual anxiety. The rediscovery of classical texts brought a flood of new, often contradictory, ideas into Europe. Plato disagreed with Aristotle. The Stoics disagreed with the Epicureans. This explosion of knowledge was exhilarating, but also deeply unsettling. It suggested that there was no single, unified truth, but a multitude of competing philosophies for a man seeking certainty. This was terrifying. You spot a fashionably quirky book on one of the shelves that perfectly captures this intellectual chaos. It's a copy of Pico della Mirandola's 900 Theses. Pico was a brilliant young philosopher who, in 1496, proposed to publicly debate 900 propositions covering every field of knowledge, from philosophy and theology to magic and the Kabbalah. His goal was to prove the underlying unity of all intellectual traditions. The Church, however, saw it as an act of astonishing arrogance and condemned the work, forcing Pico to flee. The commander owned a copy. This shows he was aware of these high-level intellectual debates. He wasn't just a superstitious soldier, he was a man grappling with the great questions of his age. His secret tower was his personal laboratory for trying to synthesize all this conflicting knowledge into a single, workable system of power. The son finally understands. This room was not a retreat from the world, it was a desperate attempt to master it. It was an arsenal, yes, but it was also a shield. It was his father's way of coping with a world that felt like it was spinning out of control. The poisons were a defense against betrayal. The astrology was a defense against uncertainty. The alchemy was a defense against death itself. It was the ultimate psychological fortress, built by a man who felt besieged on all sides by the anxieties of his time. This realization doesn't excuse his father's actions. The hit list in the chimney is still a testament to a monstrous amorality, but it provides context. It makes him understandable. The commander was not an anomaly. He was an extreme product of his era. He took the fears and ambitions that were simmering in the heart of the Renaissance and pushed them to their absolute, logical, and terrifying conclusion. The fire, the son now thinks, will be an act of mercy. A mercy for his own future. Yes, but also a mercy for his father. It will be the final, definitive admission that the project has failed. That the fortress has been breached, that the world cannot be controlled, that fate cannot be commanded, and that death comes for everyone, even for sorcerer kings. It's an act of acceptance, an acceptance of the chaos his father fought so desperately, and so secretly, to conquer. With this newfound, tragic understanding of his father's motives, the son's resolve to act becomes less frantic and more deliberate. The fire is a necessity, but it cannot be rash, panic-attacked. He needs to think. What to burn, what, if anything, to save. As he contemplates this, an idea strikes him. This room is a repository of esoteric knowledge, but it's all theoretical. He has no way of knowing how effective any of it really was. He needs an outside perspective, a professional opinion. He turns to the old servant. The only other living soul who knows of this room. Is there an apothecary in the city, he asks. An old one, a wise one, someone who keeps his own counsel. The old servant thinks for a moment, his brow furrowed. There is a man, he says slowly, Master Niccolo. His shop is on the street of Dyers. He is very old. Some say he is more than just an apothecary. The implication is clear. Master Niccolo is a man who walks the same blurry line between science and superstition that the commander did. He is a risk, but a calculated one. The son makes a decision. He will take a sample, just one. He needs to see how the mundane world of professional science reacts to the exotic contents of this tower. He scans the shelves, looking for the perfect test case. He doesn't want to take something obviously magical, like a talisman. He doesn't want to take an infamous, named poison like Cantarella. He needs something ambiguous. Something that could be either medicine or poison. His eyes land on a small, corked bottle containing a thick, dark, almost black, syrupy liquid. The label is a single word, written in his father's neat hand, the Riak. This is the perfect choice. The Riak was one of the most famous and complex remedies in the history of medicine. Originating in ancient Greece as an antidote for animal bites, by the Renaissance it had evolved into an extraordinarily complex panacea, a cure-all believed to be effective against everything from the plague to simple melancholia. Its recipe was not secret, but it was incredibly elaborate, sometimes containing over 70 ingredients, including viper's flesh, opium, cinnamon, and dozens of rare herbs and gums. The history of the Riac is a fascinating rabbit hole. Major cities like Venice and Montpellier became famous for their official, publicly produced versions. The process was a major civic event, with apothecaries mixing the ingredients in huge cauldrons in the town square under the supervision of medical authorities to prevent fraud. It was the pharmaceutical blockbuster of its day. But there was a catch. Because the recipe was so complex and the ingredients so expensive, countless cheaper, counterfeit, or private versions existed, and because one of its key ingredients was opium, a poorly made the Riac could be ineffective at best, and dangerously narcotic at worst. Whether the commander's private brew was a genuine attempt at a super antidote or a cleverly disguised poison was impossible to know. The son carefully pockets the small bottle. He gives strict instructions to the old servant to guard the tower door and let no one enter. Then, cloaked and hooded against the pre-dawn chill, he slips out of the castle and makes his way down into the sleeping city. The street of Dyers is a narrow, winding alley. The air is still thick with the chemical smells of the cloth trade. Master Nicolo's shop is easy to find. It's the only one with its shutters still closed. But a thin sliver of candlelight bleeds from under the door. The son knocks. After a long silence, the door creaks open, and a wizened face, framed by a wild mane of white hair, peers out. "We are closed. I was told you might help with a question of inheritance," the son says, using a deliberately vague term. The old apothecary's eyes, sharp and intelligent, study him for a long moment. He seems to see past the simple cloak to the authority beneath. He opens the door wider and lets the sun in. The shop is a wonderland of organized chaos. Bunches of dried herbs hang from the rafters. Jars of powders and liquids line the walls. The air is a symphony of scents: lavender, camphor, licorice, and something metallic and sharp. It's like a tamer, more professional version of his father's secret lab. The son places the bottle of the Riac on the counter. "My father was a student of remedies," he says carefully. "He left this behind. I wish to know its quality." Master Nicolo picks up the bottle. He doesn't open it. He simply holds it up to the candlelight, observing the viscosity of the liquid. He swirls it gently, watching how it clings to the glass. His face is unreadable. "The Riac," he says. "It's a statement, not a question. A noble pursuit, or a foolish one. The line is fine." He finally uncorks the bottle. He doesn't taste it, he's too wise for that. Instead, he wafts the scent towards his nose, inhaling cautiously. He dips a small glass rod into the syrup and lets a drop fall onto a piece of parchment. He watches how it spreads, how it stains the paper. "The opium content is very high," he says, his voice a low murmur. "Unusually high. This would bring a sleep from which many men would not wake. A mercy, perhaps, for a man in great pain, or a convenient final mercy for a man whose presence is inconvenient." He looks up, his sharp eyes meeting the sun's. He knows. He may not know the specifics, but he understands the dual nature of the object he holds. Then he adds a quirky, professional detail. "And the viper's flesh is of poor quality. Likely an ass, not a true horned viper. It compromises the sympathetic balance. Your father was a talented amateur, but he was no Venetian master." The verdict is devastatingly simple. The commander's the Riac was a potent sedative, a borderline poison, and technically, a flawed piece of craftsmanship. This one small assessment from a true professional seems to encapsulate his father's entire secret life: ambitious, dangerous, and ultimately, not quite as masterful as he believed himself to be. The son nods slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the apothecary's discretion and expertise. He leaves a heavy gold coin on the counter payment for the consultation and for the silence he hopes it buys. As he walks back towards the castle in the grey light of dawn, he feels a strange sense of peace. The mystery is gone. He has seen his father's secret for what it is: a grand, dangerous, and ultimately flawed project. He now knows what he must do. The visit to the apothecary wasn't just about identifying a substance. It was about bridging the gap between his father's fantastical, secret world and the real world of professional knowledge. It was the final piece of the puzzle. Now, he came out. Returning to the castle as the first rays of dawn streak the sky, the son feels a newfound resolve. The apothecary's pragmatic, almost nonchalant assessment of the lyric has grounded him. The fantastical, terrifying nature of his father's secrets has been reduced to a question of craftsmanship and quality control. It's manageable. He can handle this. He walks straight back to the tower, the old servant letting him in with a worried look. The son gives him a reassuring nod. The time for fear and confusion is over. The time for action has come. But as he stands in the doorway of the secret room, looking at the vast collection, he is faced with a difficult, almost philosophical choice. What to destroy, and what, if anything, to save. His first instinct, the one born of fear and shame, was to burn it all, to reduce every book, every vial, every talisman to anonymous ash. But now, that seems like a child's solution. A tantrum against the past. He is not just his father's son, he is his father's heir. And an heir has a duty not just to protect the family's name, but to preserve its power. And this room, for all its danger, is a repository of power. He begins a mental triage. The poisons, the raw ingredients, they must go. They are too dangerous, too volatile. Their existence serves no purpose but to invite disaster. He pictures them being discreetly bagged, carried to a deep pit in a remote part of the castle grounds, and buried, not burned. Burning them might release toxic fumes. The final, posthumous act of poison from his father. Burying them feels more appropriate. A quiet return to the earth. The magical artifacts, the Picatrix, the other Grimoires, the talismans present a more complex problem. These are the most heretical, the most damning objects in the collection. The risk of keeping them is immense. His logical mind, the part of him that is a soldier and a ruler, tells him they must be the first things to be utterly destroyed, reduced to nothing in the hottest part of the forge. But another part of him, the part that is his father's son, hesitates. He looks at the Picatrix. It's a gateway to a power he can't deny his father sought for a reason. In the violent, unpredictable world he is inheriting, can he afford to throw away any potential weapon? No matter how dangerous or forbidden, it's the ultimate dilemma of the pragmatist. The choice between moral purity and practical advantage. This dilemma was a very real one for Renaissance rulers. Many, like the Medici, were patrons of both the church and of Neoplatonic philosophers who dabbled in natural magic. They walked a fine line, supporting public piety while privately exploring more esoteric sources of knowledge and power. The question of whether a ruler should be feared or loved, good or merely effective, was famously explored by Machiavelli in The Prince. Machiavelli argued that, for a ruler, the appearance of virtue was often more important than virtue itself. The son is facing a very Machiavellian choice: be the good man who destroys the evil books, or be the effective ruler who understands their power and keeps them hidden. He decides on a compromise. He will destroy the most explicit and dangerous texts, the Grimoires like the Picatrix. But he will keep the more philosophical works, the books on Neoplatonism and Hermeticism. He will also keep the practical manuals on metallurgy and botany. He can justify these as works of natural philosophy and science. It's a way of trimming the poisoned branches of the tree while keeping the trunk of knowledge intact. And what about the notebooks, the coded journal of experiments, the psychological bestiaries? The list of names, this is the heart of his father's personal power. This is the true inheritance. To destroy this would be to throw away a lifetime of intelligence gathering. To keep it is to accept the terrible burden of that knowledge. You notice a quirky detail as he agonizes over this decision. On the workbench, next to the cryptographic journal, is a small, simple tool, a pair of reading glasses. The lenses are thick, made of polished quartz, and the frame is simple iron. It's an object of utter banality amidst the esoteric chaos. His father, The man who tried to command spirits and read the future in the stars was also a man who was getting old, whose eyes were failing him. He needed help to read his own secret code. This simple human object serves as a stark reminder of his mortality, his physical limitations. It makes the knowledge in the books seem less like forbidden cosmic power and more like the hard-won research of an aging man trying to stay ahead of the game. The sight of the reading glasses seems to tip the scales for the son. He will keep the notebooks, all of them. It is his duty to understand the threats his father was tracking, to know the enemies his family has. He will not use the knowledge as his father did. He will not be a sorcerer. He will use it as a spy master, as a strategist. He will treat it as intelligence, not as magic. It is a dangerous rationalization, a slippery slope. But it is the one he chooses. The decision is made. The poisons will be buried. The grimoires will be burned. The philosophical and scientific books will be saved and quietly integrated into the main library. And the personal journals, the true secret, will be kept by him, and him alone. It is a difficult, morally ambiguous compromise. Historians would surely debate his choice for centuries if they knew of it. Is he sanitizing his father's legacy? Or is he becoming complicit in it? Is he a reformer? Or is he just a more cautious version of the man he's judging? There is no easy answer. He has chosen not to erase his father's sins, but to manage them. He has chosen to inherit the shadow. The plan is set. A difficult, pragmatic compromise between Erasu and inheritance. Now comes the final, crucial step: deciphering the core secrets his father left behind. He can't simply lock the coded journals away. To truly control this dangerous legacy, he must understand it. He must crack the cipher. He sits at the workbench, the heavy cryptographic journal open before him. The old servant stands by the door, a silent, anxious guardian. The rising sun now casts a weak, grey light through the high window, making the torchlight seem garish and orange. The sun feels a strange sense of calm. The chaos of discovery has settled into a focused, intellectual challenge. It's a puzzle, and his father, a lover of puzzles, has left him all the pieces. He just needs to figure out how to assemble them. He knows he can't solve it with brute force. He needs a key. Rosetta Stone. He thinks back to all the elements HES uncovered, the astrological symbols, the bestiary of animal archetypes, the geometric shapes keyed to the names on the chimney. These are the building blocks of the code. He starts with a hypothesis. The cipher is likely not a simple one-to-one substitution. His father was too sophisticated for that. It's probably a polyalphabetic cipher, meaning a single symbol might represent different letters depending on its position or a keyword. This was the cutting edge of cryptography in his day. But what is the keyword? He flips through the book, his eyes scanning the dense pages of code, HES looking for a word or phrase that repeats, something that stands out. But everything is a uniform, incomprehensible wall of text. He feels a familiar wave of frustration. He gets up and paces, his boots kicking up dust. He stops in front of the chimney, staring at the list of names. G, S, F, D, M, C, B, the names of his father's powerful enemies. Then he looks at his father's own name, the one on the natal chart he used to open the box. Marco Antonio. Maybe the key is a name. He tries using Marco as a keyword, scribbling on a spare piece of parchment, trying to align the letters with the symbols. It produces nothing but gibberish. He tries Antonio. More gibberish. He tries the family name. Still nothing. This struggle is at the heart of historical code breaking. Without a key, even a relatively simple cipher can be nearly impossible to crack. Many historical documents remain undeciphered to this day, their secrets locked away forever. Historians and cryptographers still debate over coded messages found in the archives of figures like Mary, Queen of Scots, or in the margins of Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks. Sometimes, the key is a word from the Bible. Other times, it's the name of a lover, or a seemingly random phrase known only to the sender and receiver. The sun is about to give up on this line of attack when he remembers the strange, almost ridiculous detail from the Picatrix, the spell to become unbeatable at chess. He remembers his father loved to play chess. He was a master of the game, patiently trapping his opponents, and he often used a very specific, classical opening gambit. He called it the Dragon's Defense. It was an unusual name, not a standard term. He said it was his own invention. Dragon. The word echoes in the son's mind. He remembers the pungent smell of his father's thinking incense dragon's blood resin. The dragon was a powerful alchemical symbol, representing the primal matter, the beginning of the great world. He rushes back to the journal. Drago, the Italian word for dragon. He tries it as the keyword. He takes a section of the code he suspects is a recipe, one with a drawing of monkshade next to it. He writes the letters DRAGO over and over again above the coded symbols. Then, using a simple cipher or method he learned as a young officer, he begins the painstaking process of substitution. The first symbol, under the letter D, becomes a T. The second, under R, becomes an A. The third, under A, becomes a K. Nothing, just more nonsense. He slumps in his chair, defeated. It was a good idea, a clever connection, but it was wrong. He stares at the page, at the jumble of symbols and his own failed decryption, and then he sees it, on the inside cover of the journal, where he found the obsidian key. There's another small detail he had overlooked, scratched very faintly into the wood, as if with a fingernail, is a single word. It's a Greek word. The Greek word for dragon or serpent. Why Greek? He thinks of the Greek manuscript of Almetripples in the box. He thinks of the humanist obsession with returning to the original classical sources. His father was not just using the Italian word, he was using the ancient, original, more powerful word. He was a purist. With trembling hands, he tries again. He writes the Greek letters delta, Mu, Alpha, Kappa, Omega, new above the ciphertext. He uses their numerical values in the Greek alphabet as the key for his substitution matrix. The first symbol becomes an R, the second, a M, the third, a C, the fourth, an I, the fifth, a P, the sixth, an E, RECIP. It works. He has it. A surge of triumphant adrenaline courses through him. He has done it. He has cracked the code. He has unlocked his father's mind. He immediately turns to the page with the drawing of the wolf's head and the monogram G. S. Giovanni Sforza. He begins to translate, his quill scratching furiously on the parchment. The text is terse, clinical, subject lupus, nature choleric, prone to pride, method administration of agent Saturn's breath via inhalation over 3 months. Agent delivered by trusted physician compensated. Effect induced melancholia, paranoia, erratic behavior. Outcome subject lost political support, retired from public life, successful. It's all there, a cold, concise record of a successful psychological assassination. He then turns to the entry for C. B. Cesare A. Borgia. The spider. The entry is different. It's a long analysis of Borgia's own methods, his network, his suspected use of counter-Allah. But, at the end, the coded text reads subject to unpredictable, high risk of exposure, no action taken, observe only. His father, the great predator, had met a creature he was unwilling to attack. He feared Cesare Borgia. This note is perhaps the most illuminating discovery of all. It reveals the limits of his father's power, the edge of his nerve. It shows that even in this secret world of shadows, there was a hierarchy of fear. The son sits back, the translated pages before him. The last secret has been revealed. The coded journal is not just a recipe book or a hit list. It's a detailed intelligence dossier, a record of successes and failures, a strategic manual for a war no one else knew was being fought. The inheritance is more terrible and more valuable than he ever could have imagined. The cipher is broken. The secrets all laid bare. The son sits at the workbench. The translated pages spread before him like a dark tapestry. The story they tell is one of calculated, patient malice, of a shadow war fought with chemicals and whispers. But now that he understands the full scope of his father's operations, a new, more profound question emerges. Was it worth it? Did this vast, secret enterprise of poison, magic, and espionage actually achieve its goals, or was it all just an elaborate, paranoid fantasy? He looks at the entry for Giovanni Sforza. The lupus. The operation was deemed a success. Sforza did indeed decline in power and retire. But the son, who knows the politics of the Ramagan region, knows there was more to that story. Sforza's fall from grace was also due to the shifting alliances of the Pope and the rising power of Cesare Borgia. His father's subtle campaign of psychological warfare may have contributed. It may have been a gentle push on a door that was already opening. But was it the decisive factor, or was his father just taking credit for a political tide that was already turning? This is a classic problem in history and intelligence analysis, the difficulty of proving causation. A spy might provide a crucial piece of information, but was that information what truly changed the outcome of a battle? Or were other factors more important? The commander's journal presents everything as a clear cause and effect success. But the son, with the benefit of objective distance, can see the ambiguity. He can see his father's potential for confirmation bias, his desire to believe his secret arts were more powerful than they actually were. He then turns his attention to the bigger picture. His father's ultimate goal was to secure his family's power, to create a lasting and untouchable dynasty. He poured decades of his life, immense resources, and his very soul into this secret project. And what was the result? He died, riddled with anxiety, in his bed. He has left his son and heir with a legacy so toxic it threatens to destroy the very dynasty he sought to protect. By any rational measure, the grand project was a catastrophic failure. The son starts to see the entire enterprise in a new, almost pathetic light. His father was like a man who spends his entire life building an incredibly complex and beautiful suit of armor, only to find that it's so heavy he can't move in it, and that he has neglected to learn how to actually fight. He had mastered the shadows, but he had perhaps lost sight of the substance. And this leads to the most controversial question of all. One, historians of science and magic still grapple with: did any of the magic actually work? The poisons, clearly, were real. The psychological manipulation was a tangible strategy. But the talismans, the incantations, the attempts to summon spirits, did they have any real effect on the world? Or only on the mind of the practitioner? The modern, rational view would say no. It was all superstition. The successes were coincidences, misinterpreted events seen through a lens of magical belief. But for a man of the Renaissance, the answer was not so clear. The placebo effect is a powerful thing, and its dog cousin, the nocebo effect, is just as potent. If a man believed he was cursed, the resulting fear and stress could genuinely make him sick. If the commander believed his talismans gave him an edge, that confidence could make him a more formidable and intimidating negotiator. In this sense, the magic worked by creating real psychological effects, both in the target and in the user. It was a powerful tool for psychological warfare, even if the spirits weren't real. You notice a quirky, final detail in the cryptographic journal. Tucked into the back, on a page of its own, is a single, untransed entry. It's not in the usual cipher. It's written in a bizarre mix of Latin, Greek, and what looks like Hebrew characters. At the top is a drawing of a dragon eating a scorpion. The son has no idea what it means. It's a final lockbox, a secret his father took to the grave. But next to the incomprehensible text is a simple drawing of a star, and a date, his own birthday. The son stares at it. This entry is about him. It's a horoscope, a prophecy, a magical working his father performed for his own heir. He cannot read it, and he realizes he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to know what his father saw, or thought he saw, in his future. He wants his future to be his own, unwritten, free from the astrological determinism that shackled his father. He has a choice. He could spend years trying to decipher this final message, continuing his father's work, stepping fully into his shoes. Or he could let it go. He could accept that some secrets are best left unknown. He makes his decision. He carefully tears the single page from the journal. This one page, his own prophecy, he will burn. The rest of the journal, the dangerous but practical intelligence on his enemies, he will keep. It's a symbolic act. He is rejecting his father's magical worldview, his obsession with fate and destiny, while accepting the worldly, practical burden of his political inheritance. He is choosing to be a prince, not a magician. He realizes now what his father's true weapon was. It wasn't the poison. It wasn't the magic. It was the fear he inspired. It was the reputation. The rumor that he was a man who understood the dark arts was more powerful than any single substance or spell. People feared him because they didn't know the limits of his power. They imagined it to be far greater than it was. His greatest creation was not an elixir or a talisman, but the myth of himself. And that myth, the son now understands, is a double-edged sword. It protected his father in life, but now it threatens to curse him in death. The final decision is made, a delicate balance of preservation and destruction. The son feels a sense of clarity he hasn't felt since this whole ordeal began. He knows what he must do, not just with the contents of the room, but with the narrative itself. He must replace his father's dangerous myth with a safer one. The physical act of cleansing begins at dusk the next day, under his direct, watchful eye. A few trusted servants, who owe their lives to his family, are brought into the secret. They are told a simplified, palatable version of the truth that the commander was a brilliant but eccentric student of natural philosophy and alchemy, and that some of his experiments were too dangerous to be preserved. There is no mention of magic, no mention of the hit list. The raw ingredients are the first to go. Heavy canvas bags are filled with the strange powders, the dried roots, the mysterious crystals. The work is done in silence, with a funereal solemnity. The servants, their faces covered with cloths, handle the jars with a caution bordering on terror. The bags are carried not to the courtyard, but through a series of little-used cellars to a deep, dry well at the base of the oldest part of the castle, a relic that has been sealed for a century. One by one, the bags are dropped into the darkness, their soft thuds echoing up from the depths. Then, the servants fill the well with rubble and seal it with fresh mortar. The poisons are not just buried, they are entombed. Next comes the fire. A great bonfire is built in the center of the main courtyard, ostensibly for the burning of old, plague-infected tapestries and bedding are plausible, even responsible. Act of sanitation after a long illness. Most of the castle staff is kept away. Only the son and the old servant are present at the fire's heart. The son himself carries the condemned books from the tower. He feels the weight of the Picatrix, its dry leather cool against his hands. For a moment, he hesitates. He thinks of the immense, forbidden power contained within its pages, the temptation to keep it, to master it, to become the man his father failed to be, is a cold, seductive whisper in the back of his mind. It is the ultimate test. This moment reflects a recurring theme in history and literature, the seductive power of a dangerous legacy. Think of Frodo with the One Ring, or Michael Corleone inheriting his father's empire. The heir is always faced with the choice to either reject the source of power or be consumed by it. The son is standing on that knife's edge. He takes a deep breath and tosses the book into the heart of the roaring fire. The flames leap up, greedily consuming the ancient vellum. He watches as the pages curl and blacken, the strange sigils and diagrams glowing orange for a moment before vanishing into smoke and death. He adds the other grimoires, the botched talismans, and finally, the single, torn-out page from the journal, his own horoscope. He is releasing his future from his father's grasp. As the smoke curls into the night sky, carrying with it the last remnants of his father's magical ambitions, he thinks about the power of reputation. His father had cultivated a myth of being a dark sorcerer. This was a powerful but unstable weapon. Now, the son must build a new myth. He will be the dutiful son who cleansed his father's legacy of its eccentricities. He will be the pious, modern ruler who rejects the superstitious practices of the past. He will be seen publicly burning these dangerous alchemical texts, an act that will be reported by the servants and will surely reach the ears of the local bishop. It's a masterful piece of political theater. He is using the very act of destruction to enhance his own reputation for piety and wisdom. He is fighting a myth with a myth. You can't help but notice a quirky, historical irony in this. The printing press, which was becoming more common in this era, played a huge role in both spreading and debunking knowledge. While it allowed for the mass production of books like the Malleus Maleficum, fueling the witch hunts, it also allowed for the wider dissemination of scientific and rationalist ideas. The son is, in a way, at a crossroads of this information age. His father relied on secret, hand-copied manuscripts. The son is now crafting a public narrative, a story that can be spread and repeated, which is a much more modern form of power. The fire dies down. The most dangerous secrets are gone, either buried in the earth or scattered as ash on the wind. The son feels a profound sense of relief, but it is not a happy relief. It's the grim satisfaction of a surgeon who has just completed a difficult and painful amputation. He has saved the patient, his family's future, but he has had to cut away a part of its past to do so. He is left now at the final, most dangerous piece of the inheritance, the cryptographic journal, the Book of Names. He takes it not to his own chambers, but back to the now empty tar room. This room will be his secret, just as it was his father's, but its purpose will be different. It will not be a laboratory for magic. It will be a cold, quiet room for study and analysis, a war room. He has rejected his father's methods, but he has accepted his father's war. The shield he is building for his family will not be made of talismans and spells, but of information, strategy, and a deep, cynical understanding of the men who rule the world. He has survived the discovery, but in doing so, he has been changed by it forever. The fire in the courtyard has died to glowing embers, and a quiet dawn is breaking over the castle. The air smells of ash and a false sense of purification. The son stands alone in the now sanitized tower room. The shelves are bare. The workbench is cleared. The floor is swept clean of its arcane dust. All that remains is the coded journal, which sits on the bench like a block of black ice, radiating a cold and silent power. The crisis of discovery is over, but the long, quiet challenge of inheritance has just begun. He picks up the journal. It feels heavier now, not because of its physical weight, but because of the knowledge he possesses. He knows the keyword Draken. He holds the key to his father's entire intelligence network. His deepest analyzers of the most powerful people in Italy. He has a choice. He could lock the book away, a trophy of his survival, and try to rule as a good and honorable man, ignoring the viper's nest he knows is all around him. Or he could use it. He sits down on the simple stool, opens the journal to the first page, and begins to read. Not with the frantic energy of a codebreaker, but with the slow, meticulous focus of a scholar. He spends hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky, tracing the coded entries with his finger. He is not just reading about his father's targets, he is learning his father's mind. He is studying his methods of analysis, his understanding of human weakness, his terrifyingly accurate grasp of political psychology. He learns that his father believed every man, no matter how powerful, had a crack in his soul, a weakness, a fear, a hidden desire. The key to controlling a man was to find that crack and insert all ever. For one man, it was greed. For another, pride. For a third, a secret shame. The cynical philosophy is chilling, but the sun cannot deny its effectiveness. It is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. This concept, that virtue is a liability and understanding vice is a strength, is a core theme of the political philosophy that was emerging in Renaissance Italy, most famously articulated by Niccolò Machiavelli. Whether the commander ever read Machiavelli, whose major works were written slightly later, is a point of academic debate. but it's clear they were both drinking from the same well of political realism. They were products of an environment where the idealist did not survive. The son is now the unwilling student in this dark school of thought, with his own father as the teacher. As he reads, he begins to see the journal not as a list of sins, but as a shield. He learns of a secret alliance between two families he thought were enemies. He learns of a cardinal's hidden debt to a banking house, a piece of information that could give him immense leverage. He learns that a supposedly loyal captain in his own army has a brother in the service of a rival. This is not magic. This is priceless, actionable intelligence. He comes across a quirky and surprisingly modern-sounding entry. It's an analysis of a rival commander, but it doesn't focus on his military strategy. It focuses on his humors, his diet, and his sleeping habits. His father notes that the man drinks too much wine at night, sleeps early, and is therefore prone to indecision and irritability in the morning. He advises that any crucial negotiations with this man should be scheduled for the afternoon, when his mind is clearer. It's a small, almost trivial detail, but it's a stunning piece of proto-behavioral science. His father was using a deep understanding of his opponent's daily rhythms to gain a tactical advantage. The son feels a profound and unsettling shift happening within himself. The moral revulsion is still there, but it's being overshadowed by a grudging admiration for his father's sheer brilliance. He had built a private intelligence agency, single-handedly. He had been playing a game of three-dimensional chess while everyone else was playing checkers. The son realizes that to simply reject this legacy would not only be foolish, it would be a dereliction of his duty as a ruler. He must take up this work. He makes a decision. He will continue the journal. He will keep his own records. In the same code, the dragon will have a new master, but his purpose will be different. His father used this knowledge for offense, to subtly attack and manipulate his rivals. The son will use it for defense. It will be his early warning system, his map of the political minefield he must navigate. He will not be a predator, but he will be a vigilant shepherd of his people, armed with a wolf's knowledge. It's a fine line to walk, a dangerous rationalization. The path of using dark knowledge for good reasons is a notoriously slippery one. But it is the path he chooses. He has accepted his inheritance. He has taken the heavy, poisoned cloak from his father's shoulders and placed it upon his own. He closes the journal. The room is quiet. The secret is safe, now locked within his own mind. He has preserved his family's name, but at the cost of his own innocence. He has become the keeper of the flame, a solitary sentinel guarding a dangerous truth. The physical objects, the poisons and the grimoires, were the lesser part of the legacy. The true inheritance was this book, and the worldview it contained. He has looked into the abyss, and now the abyss is his most valuable possession. Years pass. The tower door remains locked, its secret known only to you. The memory of that frantic night of discovery has softened, its sharp edges worn down by time, but it has never faded. It has become the silent, invisible foundation upon which your entire rule is built. You are the commander now, the Condottieri, and you are, by all accounts, a success. But your success is of a different flavor than your father's. Where your father was feared for his unpredictable cruelty, you are respected for your uncanny foresight. Where he was seen as a man who dealt in shadows and whispers, you are seen as a man blessed with incredible luck, a man who always seems to be one step ahead of his rivals. No one suspects that your luck is, in fact, the product of painstaking study, of late nights spent in the tower room, poring over the coded journal your father left behind, and adding your own meticulous entries. You have become a master of the defensive art. You use the journal not to launch attacks, but to preempt them. When you learn from the journal of a potential betrayal by a neighboring lord, you don't poison him. Instead, you arrange a brilliant and advantageous marriage alliance for his daughter, binding his family to yours in a way that makes betrayal unthinkable. When you discover a captain's secret loyalties, you don't execute him. You quietly transfer him to a border garrison where his brother serves, effectively neutralizing them both by turning their secret into a shared vulnerability. You have learned your father's lessons in control, but you apply them with the subtlety of a diplomat, not the brutality of an assassin. This transition from an offensive to a defensive use of intelligence is a fascinating and often debated topic in the history of espionage. Many states have found that a purely aggressive intelligence apparatus can create more enemies than it defeats, leading to a cycle of paranoia and retaliation. A more stable, long-term strategy often involves using intelligence for deterrence and strategic advantage, rather than for covert attacks. You have, through instinct and a desire to be a different man than your father, stumbled upon this more modern and sustainable doctrine of power. Over the years, you have become a connoisseur of secrets, a silent observer of the weaknesses and hidden desires of the powerful. You see the world through your father's cynical eyes, but you act with your own measured hand. The knowledge is a heavy burden. There are days when the weight of all the secrets, all the potential for darkness, feels crushing. You understand now the deep anxiety that drove your father, the terrible loneliness of knowing too much. One day, an old, leather-bound book arrives, a gift from a scholar in Florence. It's a new work of political philosophy that is causing a stir. Machiavelli's The Prince. As you read it, a chill runs down your spine. It's as if the author had secretly gained access to your father's journal. The cold pragmatism, the advice to be a fox and a lion, the assertion that it is safer to be feared than loved, it's all there. Your family has secret. Private philosophy has, it seems, been discovered independently and is now being broadcast to the world. You realize your father was not a monster in isolation. He was simply ahead of his time, a pioneer in a new and terrible science of power that was now becoming common knowledge. There's a quirky, human detail in your later life. You develop a passion for gardening, not the sinister, hidden garden of your father, but a beautiful, open garden of roses and fruit trees in the main courtyard. You find a genuine peace in the simple, honest work of tending to living things. It is your antidote to the poison of the tower. It is your private act of rebellion against your father's legacy, a conscious choice to cultivate beauty instead of lethality. Your courtiers see it as a sign of your gentle and refined nature, further proof that you are nothing like your fearsome father. They don't understand that the garden is not a hobby, it is a necessity. It is the only thing that keeps the shadows at bay. You are an old man now. Your own son is grown, a strong and honorable young man who knows nothing of the secret in the tower. You have protected him from the burden you were forced to carry, but you are faced with one last, agonizing decision. What to do with the journal? Do you pass this terrible knowledge on to him, risking that it might corrupt him as it almost corrupted you, or do you finally do what you considered doing all those years ago, burn it, and let the secrets die with you? You look back on your life, on the peace and stability you have brought to your lands, a peace bought with secret knowledge. You think of the world, which has not grown any less dangerous. You realize that your father, in his own twisted way, had given you the greatest gift a ruler could ask for: the truth. A terrible, ugly truth, but the truth nonetheless. Then you cannot, in good conscience, deny that same shield to your own son. One night, you bring your son to the tower. You unlock the door, you show him the empty room, and a single, black book on the workbench, and you begin to tell him the story. The story of his grandfather, the story of a secret that is now his to carry. You have chosen to continue the chain, to pass on the burden. The secret is not a poison to be buried, nor a spell to be cast, but a legacy to be understood, managed, and endured. It is the small, dark, beating heart of your family, a piece of historical dust that holds the weight of a kingdom. The story is over now. The echoes of the past have faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the night. Feel the weight of those secrets lifting from your shoulders. Like a heavy cloak being gently removed, the stone of the castle softens, the torchlight dims, and the dust of centuries settles into a peaceful, dreamlike haze. You are floating away from that tower, away from the burden of knowledge, drifting into a space of quiet comfort. The anxieties of the Renaissance, the fears of popes and princes, dissolve into the soft darkness around you. The scent of old paper and strange herbs is replaced by the clean, simple air of your own room. The complex web of intrigue unravels into a single, smooth thread of thought, leading you gently downwards, into a deeper, more restful state. You are no longer an observer of history, you are simply here. Now, safe in your bed, let the silence be a blanket, warm and comforting. Let each breath you take be a quiet step further away from the waking world, into the soft, welcoming landscape of your own dreams. There are no ciphers to solve here, no secrets to keep. There is only peace. The end of the article. Good night.